Let's go ahead and start off the meeting by rising and joining in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Let's go into approval of our existing agenda. I believe there are quite a few things that we need to address there. I saw Kirsten mention something right off the bat.
Yeah, NRCA annual meeting is in March, but all the freebies or the cheapies are before January, so I think we should get somebody to be the maybe director of the voting.
The annual meeting delegate, right?
Thank you.
Delegate.
My copy has not hit in yet.
All right. So we'll suggest to put that at the bottom of the board action agenda. So that would be, it'll end up right after the roundup director appointments. At least that would be the suggestion. Any other changes, additions to our current agenda?
Yes, we have two more additions, Brandon.
Yes, we have, let's see, I believe it would be under item number Roman numeral 5A, little Roman numeral 3. The Finance and Audit Committee recommendation on a building proposal that they received. I think there's going to be a report on that needs to be added. And
Then for A4, it would be a memo to approve we're ready to move into the rate stabilization fund.
okay, yeah. So that, yes, that would be Roman numeral 5A, and then we'd add a new Roman numeral 4 that's not on this.
No. 3A3 is already added for back recommendation. It's already on board, and it's a prioritize, evaluate, new builds. We just need to add A4.
Yeah, so yeah, so the A4 would be this rate stabilization fund memo. So
Yep.
2 adds under
Board action
agenda. So yeah, we probably need a director to move for those.
Yeah, so other things. Yeah.
So moved.
Tim.
So if you need a motion for this, make a motion to have that forward. The other question I have is, where in this agenda do we go through the financials that we have?
So my proposal was when we go to the dashboard, we have Patrick go.
So it's at the end.
Yes.
So move rate stabilization fund approval for December to add it to this agenda.
Thank you for the motion. Kohler.
Just for clarity, what Kirsten asked for. So 5D, the NRECA annual meeting is getting moved down to.
No, this was just, so this isn't the agenda we posted. This is sort of a proposed amendment that you're seeing. We see it with the watermark of on it. So we need to add, that wasn't in the original agenda. We need to add it here.
Okay, well, it's in a different place than what you mentioned, but you said you'd have it around roundup or down below.
No, just below roundup director appointments. Yeah, so it is where it shows up in onboard. It's just that the current amended agenda in onboard is more recent than what we'll publish. So that's all we're doing there. We're putting it exactly where it shows up. Okay, so motion to add the movement to the rate stabilization fund. Should we just add to that? Is there anything else? I mean, we have the building piece, the NRECA piece. Oh, and I want to add employee matter discussion as item C in executive session. Help me out, Graham. Can we just try and make a full motion for all of that?
I think I think we can pose that as one sort of group of a slate of amendments.
I'm gonna amend my motion.
That'd be great if you vote, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's what happens if we do it.
Emotionally? Yeah. Are you just amending to include all of those things?
Yeah, as a slate, I think that's.
As a slate of agenda changes. Are there, so motion to modify the agenda. Second by Kirsten. Any discussion on that? Any clarification still needed before we vote for those agenda changes? Seeing none. Okay, well, then we will vote on Tim's motion to modify the agenda. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we have an agenda. We will move into member comments and just check to see if we have anyone. Are there any online members who would like to comment? I guess raise your hand, right? You know, if you're on there and you want to comment, please click raise your hand.
There's only one person on there.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, not seeing any, then we'll move past member comments. Into consent board items. Anything that any board members would like to remove from the consent board items before we vote on it as a consent? Seeing none, I would accept a motion to approve the consent board items. Moved by Kohler, second by Tim. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all in favor of approval of consent board items, raise your hand or say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, consent board items pass. Into CEO and staff reports then, Jessica.
Okay, thank you. So we'll share that on the screen. Make sure you bring that up. So this was updated as of 8:33 a.m. this morning because of the early date of the board meeting. What Patrick's told me is that our large industrial building is on a set cycle, and so we didn't get those numbers in until late last night. So his team was working on this probably at 5 a.m. this morning. So thank you. Okay, so we'll start. So this will be new information. So on the second slide. So these are all green checks except for the explanation point, and I've brought this up before because it's an average over the year. We get some months that are they go over the average, so it impacts our average for the year. But for the month, we have met our goals. And again, I think we're going to try to think through how best to give the board information on this, but we'll get into more detail on a later slide on that metric. Any questions there? And then I'll have, when I get to the financial slides, I'll have Patrick pause and then share his memo and the financials that we can walk through. And I think Drew will share that. Met all of our goals, even cash though, so that's good. Okay, here's the next slide. No lost time events in November, good news. Again, we continue to complete our training, 0 cyber incidents. We've had a lot more phishing emails come through, so just reiterate to all of you. I even just got one yesterday. I haven't heard back from Elizabeth about this, but it was from our insurance and it looked very valid. Drew even said it looked pretty valid, so I'm hoping it's not valid. So just keep in mind that if you bank with someone and it's even coming from your bank, don't click on the link, actually go to the website. It's really important. Now is the time for a lot of phishing campaigns. Okay, so Drew's team again is doing a lot more work on upgrading our systems to make sure we're secure cyber-wise. I would have to report that Dan was actually at United Power last week, and he told us that They hardly have any security even, so. While people may think we go overboard, we obviously want to try to make sure we're removing that risk. And hoping that others will follow, but pretty proud of our safety team. Trent is actually in the room, he leads our safety in the back. So appreciate all the work that Trent does to keep us safe here. Okay, any questions on this slide? Okay, the next one, again, keep the lights on, replace 8 poles. So as I've mentioned, we kind of slowed down on maintenance, not to cut corners though. I think that Jerry's tired of hearing me say, make sure you're doing maintenance and operations. That's the #1 goal. That's the most important goal. So they've done a lot of work. As you recall, those numbers were huge in the spring, really, when the snow had not melted. So they got a lot of the maintenance work done prior to this. So they were able to get now a lot of capital work done. So this is great. The pictures are Smelter Mountain, the right of way reclaiming. You can see the top, you can't really see it really well, but there's a lot of brush and trees going up into our lines. And the bottom one shows maybe a great sledding hill for Tim.
I'm glad you cleared it.
Yes, Kirsten.
These pictures remind me, last month we saw pictures of clearing and it showed the trees. And some of those trees from a fall perspective look like they could still fall into the thing.
That's
So what are our requirements around?
yeah. Jared, you want to talk about that?
So we are bound by our specific width. And on our distribution, it's 10 foot either side of center, which is a 20-foot right, which is not very big. We will work with landowners, with the Forest Service, state and federal services, if a tree is deemed hazardous. So if it's dying, if it's leaning really bad, we'll work together to remove those trees. Now, most of the trees that you saw in the last photo over on the Raptor J tie line, they're all healthy. They're super tall. It would take a heck of a wind to break them. They're all deemed healthy and in good condition. But it's a big issue that we run into. If on the Forest Service for our transmission, we're allowed to go work it outside of the right of way at 45 feet angle. So it kind of removes a lot of those happenings. But when it comes to landowners, it becomes much more difficult.
I remember that Tim had a bad fire a few years ago. And as I recall, it was from a tree falling on lines and they got sued for letting that tree grow. But we're not allowed to take it down. So I guess from a legal standpoint, we're covered, but from a safety standpoint, we're not.
Yeah, good point.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but just to let you know, we're working on our 2024 strategic initiative and targets, and this is one of those, is that fortunately Elizabeth knows the forest supervisor and has already met with him, and so we're gonna create more collaboration with him and his team to try to address the things you're talking about, at least on forest lands. And then they do have programs on private property lands that are big. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
So in this, Smelter, is there, this is on the north side, is there another?
Yes.
Line goes up there?
Jared?
Yeah, and we can beat it from with either direction, from the north or from the south. And we're planning on doing the same thing on the south side. And we're gonna rebuild that line this coming year.
I see, so the line that's being rebuilt is an unused line?
It's in service, it's just, we have alternate feeds from either side in case something happens on one section or the other.
And the communications that goes up there
I on both sides as well.
Yep.
on both sides? And both are used? Thanks.
Okay, we had another storm during the holiday. It's typical, lots of heavy wet snow. So that again, when it's heavy and wet, the primary outage is when the lines spot together. And unfortunately, when they can't reconnect, they have to go out and physically look at it. So that's what takes a long time for people to get back on the power. Any questions on this? Any others?
On the outage, the notification system seemed like it was out significant, on the emergency response side, not on this chair side, but,
Yeah.
as we talked, but just to frame that up.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up. So I already brought that up to staff and Amanda's looking into that with the team. I actually asked them to look at all the fire chiefs' accounts and make sure that all the stations, that the fire chief's phone number is connected to all their stations in their area. So they're covered, just like you were not.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you.
That was good feedback.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide. Sunnyside, we're actually gonna have a separate presentation on that today. So Dan's gonna go into more detail about the Sunnyside, so I'll pause on that. And then, as usual, our three-pronged analysis, update will be an executive session. Just a lot of events that people are asking us to attend to speak at, so that's been good. It definitely puts us in the highlight, for NRECA co-ops, but then CRA co-ops and just other utilities. So those are, definitely worthwhile so that we can get our message across to, for example, the chamber. Fort Lewis, Mountain West Renewables is primarily, it's developers, it's independent power producers, it's investor-owned utilities, co-ops, municipalities. So it's an opportunity for all of us to get together to talk about the future. So those are some pretty great things. And then the survey improvement. Why we have no updates there is because we've already reported on some big projects that we're still working on. And that's really how our members are able to use text power to text us back and forth instead of them calling or coming into the office. We're finding through the member survey, they really like emails, their number one preferred method of communication. And then texting back and forth is also preferred. Yes.
Jessica, I'm just curious on the Mountain West Renewables Conference. What's your sense? I mean, is everybody looking at this, or are we ahead? Are we kind of even with people or behind, or what?
Well, many of those entities they can self-supply. So a lot of them are further ahead on ways that they can bring renewable power through DER work. So we are behind on that, but we are ahead in regards to working on, like the KMO product is connecting our entire system to have a more analytic view of what's going on in the system and do predictive analysis. So Dan and his team are very much ahead on that. And then the B2G school bus, definitely way ahead on others on that and how we're trying to scale out on that. So we are very progressive in what we can do. Definitely behind in some areas that we can't do.
Because they're generators too.
Because they can generate, own, operate their power. Yep. Yes.
The member survey was in the appendix last month, and we talked about maybe going through it in a little more detail. I know it's not on this agenda, we can see it.
I think we're shooting for January, correct? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we will keep going, and this is where I will turn it over to Patrick.
So November was a strong month. Apologies, it was last minute. The large industrial runs on a set billing cycle that we're just waiting for those revenue numbers to drop. We finished the month with an operating margin of negative $50,128, which you have to take into consideration. There was a $250,000 entry into the fire mitigation fund, which is rate stabilization. So if you adjust for that entry and compare to the budget amount of $97,976, that puts us over budget by approximately $100,000. And that was led by top line revenue being better than budget. Residential was 3% over budget, and not over budget, but I need to get into that. And I should say 3%. And commercial was up 12%. Large industrial would be ended up being up 3%. There's some interesting anomalies with the budget. Last year for 2023, we budgeted $500,000 into rate stabilization. Under the expectation there was going to be a tri-state rate increase, and that did not come to fruition. And that also hit cost of power as well. Those two line items receive budgeted amounts expecting that rate increase. So that distorts the budget a little bit, if that makes sense. As far as controllable expenses, generally in line, they did a good job managing expenses. There were some investments in the Overstory, which is a software that essentially will look at tree density. It's kind of a GIS interface application, which I'm sure these guys know can do a lot better than I can. Road clearing continued to happen, but generally good performance from an expense management standpoint.
Okay,
I know this is last minute, so.
Judy, can you go ahead and share the memo now? And then that has all the accompanying documents that you typically get in your. You just want to walk through the, at the highest level right there? Is there a way to expand it though? Sure.
Yeah. I think the statement of operations would be. What was the second?
So is this not in the newest onboard?
It should be in there, yes.
Great.
You know what page, you know? It's not in there yet.
Then, that's, yeah, that's no.
Today, this morning about 8:15.
Oh, so to my email?
We were,
To the others.
Oh, I see.
okay, so go to the top. Go back up. Okay, why don't you speak to that, please?
So you see operating revenue, the year-to-date actual is strong, still facing well above budget. Cost of power, that's gonna be essentially yellow, so to speak, because it adjusts with revenue. The more revenue you have, the more power you're gonna purchase, so that's what that number is in yellow there. Gross margins are strong compared to budget, well over budget. Operating expenses slightly under budget, which is excellent. Operating margins at 5.130, that's well over the board target of 2%. Kilowatt sold, that's what's been driving revenue, a lot of that from the first two quarters. And I know this is the last year, so.
Patrick, will you speak a little bit louder just to make sure that the mic's picking it up and whatnot?
Absolutely. I can move closer too, yeah.
Patrick, can you scroll down to, or through? See Carol. Okay, so why don't you just kind of give the overall conclusion of what we're looking at for November? You said we're strong.
Absolutely, we're strong. If you adjust, you have to adjust for that 250K, that's a bookkeeping entry. So once you make that adjustment, we're 100K over the budgeted operating margin of 96,000. That's a significant percentage improvement. It's not a huge dollar amount, but obviously from percentage terms, this is what we planned for. Revenue was dropping, that's how revenue was driving that performance primarily. We performed better to budget from a revenue standpoint. Residential 3%, which is the leading revenue driver, and then commercial was up 12. And then expenses were in line, so that drove to that bottom line. This is essentially 100,000 after adjusting for fire mitigation, and then if you look at fire mitigation, we ended at a negative $51,128. Please.
Can you speak slowly to me about the fire mitigation and what? So what's the accounting thing? It went from, it wasn't a budgeted expense before that we were gonna be putting that money there?
No. It hits fire, essentially it will hit the expense, it will debit the expense line for operations, distribution expense operations, and then it credits the liability account for rate stabilization. So it increases the rate stabilization by 250,000 and increases our expenses by 250,000.
Because rate stabilization is just It's not an expense, I mean, we're just moving, aren't we?
Yeah, that's right. That's why I adjust for it, so to speak, because it's an accounting entry.
I hate accounting numbers.
Please.
I'm not sure you can answer this, but 12% on commercial up, that, I mean, that's pretty substantial. Any thoughts of?
Yeah, definitely. I had the same question. It's, was there some sort of anomalous driver? It looks more like a conservative budget number from the analysis we did this morning. Because ultimately, when we put together the load forecast and that revenue budget, that happens well before we have some of the information. So it's based on approximately 2 years of data. So it essentially, and I don't know if Dan has anything else to add to that, but yeah, it was primarily driven by budget rather than demand.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. When we were doing the 2023 budget was in 2021, before October. So we had, you're budgeting 2 Octobers, 2 Novembers, 2 Decembers at the time that we have. And during that time was the fluctuation of, okay, is COVID over, is COVID not, are we coming back, what's going on? And so it was really hard to judge the trending. So things were a little more favorable than we had budgeted for.
Anything else for Patrick? John?
I was going through our financials over the past few years this week. The net margins at the bottom where we report out to the annual report, the net margins attributable to the association appears to be sort of the bottom line for our profit. Could you provide a little commentary? I was having trouble sort of interpreting that. The total margins you mean? Well, in the report it says net margins attributable to the association. It's last year like 7.8 million.
So I'm in the statement of operations, that would be total margins, which I would consider net profit.
Okay.
Okay. So which I shouldn't say net profit, I gotta get.
Right. So without tripping over the language, I was just sort of asking, but just to, again, translating it in commercial terms, it's not really a profit as you would normally see for an for-profit organization, but it's essentially the excess. So it's the final difference between what is taken in and the cost to run the organization.
They would be comparable line items.
Yeah, and so in this case, what happens to that money?
That goes to patronage capital.
And it's returned to patronage.
Yes, that's right. And it goes into, obviously, there's the structure of non-operating versus operating has some nuances. But it translates into that side of the balance.
Okay, so if we had, so the past 2017 till last year, we had like a low water mark, maybe water mark was sort of in 7.8 range, right? If we had a single, I'm not. If we had a single charge of $100,000, it just comes out of that would be profit. We had a random charge. We had a Christmas party. Right.
That's right.
Right.
Should be a 1-to-1 ratio.
Right. Okay. And then that number gets flowed into, so we have $7 million of this. It goes into patronage capital. That goes into sort of a black box that creates a formula that says, well, this member gets $10 and this member gets,
this is their share.
This is their share, and that's remitted to them. And then time passes, and then there's any leftover patronage capital that's unclaimed.
It's a little bit different. So John, so when this happens and we close our books, we allocate it to the members, but we don't retire it typically for about another 20 years. It becomes sort of a 20-year loan, capital loan, as it were, and then we retire, and then we go through this retirement process, typically about 20 years later. So we typically retire 20 years until 2003.
Okay, that's very helpful. No further questions. Thanks.
I see, we get Rachel online, and Rachel, since your hand's up, I want to ask you, are you hearing us okay in here?
Yeah, I'm hearing I can hear everything. I feel like it's similar to when I'm speaking a different language where you have to like really focus and try to interpret what people are saying because it's kind of grainy. But I'm getting there.
Okay,
so
well,
thank
we'll
you.
take that advice. We'll take that advice and try and speak a little bit louder so you and everybody else online can hear. But go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Sorry I can't join you all today, but I think you're glad I can't. I'm a cootie, a walking cootie. But John, I think I'm kind of following your line of questioning here, and just to state it really concisely, that 7.8 million, it's not available. It can't be rolled forward to use in operating capital or just to use for general ops next year, right? This isn't like a standard budget. The only part of that money we could tap into in the future is once we go through the whole allocation retirement project, unclaimed credits. Is that accurate?
It becomes, it's the cash is the what we would use for operations and capital investment in the future. There's not a one-to-one relationship between what our actual cash position is and this number, because you have cash spending activities that affect the balance sheet on the asset side of the equation. This is indicative of operating cash flow. And so the cash will come in, we can apply that to various, we have a choice on how we apply cash, if that makes sense.
Maybe I'll just ask one other question, right? Because we're considering rate increases to balance out the pass through for the tri-state rate increase. But as you said earlier, Patrick, you know, part of why we have such a difference between such a margin is because we had already anticipated a rate increase that didn't come to fruition. And I guess I'm trying to figure out, is there any way to use the cushion we have, the margin we have to affect this rate increase we're looking at? And I apologize, I should know this. My brain is just kind of cloudy right now.
Oh, no apologies necessary. It's complicated. So when I was referring to the budget, that actually washes itself out because you budgeted for a rate increase on the top end and you also budgeted for a cost of power increase. The net effect on those two items is zero. The budgetary standpoint. And forgive me if I'm not understanding your question, but feel free to rephrase it. I'm happy to elaborate.
Could we use any of our 7.8 million to decrease the amount, to kind of cushion this rate increase?
No.
Okay, thank you.
We did it in the budget, but not in operations.
Let me get Dan Huntington. We'll keep going on this.
Yeah, Rachel, that profit can be used, but the members themselves are loaning that money back to the co-op to be paid 20 years later.
Thank you.
That's distributed out, but it comes in on the liability side of the balance sheet. So the co-op owes the members that money, but they're using that in the present moment.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. You good with that one, Rachel?
Yes, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Tim.
So one other thing that we'll do later in this meeting is consider taking some of that cash and putting it into a reserve that ostensibly, the rate stabilization fund, which can ostensibly be used to mitigate unexpected rate increases or fire mitigation needs or other disaster elements that we want to reserve for. So when you ask, can you take some of the margin and use it later? That is the mechanism we'll consider later in the meeting.
Anybody else?
Oh, thanks.
Okay. Anything else for finance? Tim.
So there's a line in. For me, it's, well, it's in the financials there, it's on the. It's the year-to-date actual plus updated forecast. It's 6 of the financials you sent me. So it's generation and transmission capital credits is budgeted at 1.25 million. And the projection still has that number in there. And I'm just curious whether that, we really feel that's accurate at this point. There is some distribution coming. Well, maybe this was, maybe this was paid in January. I'm not quite sure. Maybe this is, I don't think we got a distribution last year, right? There wasn't a retirement.
We did get,
Yeah, that's
2
my
million?
understanding.
Yeah, we did.
So this,
One they should get paid tomorrow, or today, what's today, the
14th.
14th, so we're paid today, actually. So I think this could be trimmed a little bit from a forecast standpoint. I would need to jump into that a little bit.
so maybe 2 questions. One, did we get paid last year's retirement this year? Which would show that. And then the second one is, yes, if we didn't, then we would be looking at a different number.
Last year's last year's retirement was paid in December of last year, if I'm remembering correctly, and then this year's retirement that they just announced should hit today,
And do we know what that number is?
approximately 1.1 million.
1 point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's what I mean. I think it needs
So there's a slight
needs a slight haircut on the forecast, so, but I need to dig into that and get the specific.
Okay.
Yeah, it was paid December 15th, 2022.
Okay, so that's it. Thanks.
But that was retirement, so that was not allocation.
An
So this is,
allocation, yeah,
well, this generation and transmission capital credits, that should be allocation,
that's right.
not retirement.
This would be retirement as well, or,
No,
sorry.
So the allocation probably would have occurred in like April, right?
Yeah, it would be retirement. This will be retirement.
it doesn't belong here, it's retirement, it's allocation.
It's allocation is mine.
In this one, yeah. I was talking about.
Yeah,
payments.
it's the same as what we just described with the co-op members, right? We turn a net profit.
Yep.
Sorry, we have positive net total margins that goes into patronage capital for the members. The same allocation happens with the state, not identical, but.
So every dollar of net margin that we do not put in there, let's say we had that $100,000 Christmas party that John mentioned, which I'm still waiting for. So that $100,000 doesn't go into our, it doesn't hit our bottom line, so we can't allocate it to our members. So every dollar that comes out of that is a dollar that does not go to our members, either in the short term or the long. Is that correct?
It is not, to your point, it is not, you're right, it is not included in capital credit, retirement, nor allocation. However, how we described it before is it does go back to our members in the form of, if LPEA had to do a rate increase, we would suggest to use this money to mitigate for that, and then it does go back to the number.
So in the long run, any dollar that we don't make is a dollar that our members don't make. Right?
Yes,
Is the point that
For profit.
I'm sorry?
That's no different than a for-profit.
Well, absolutely, and it's important to keep in mind, because I'm thinking of the net metering discussion that's gonna come up, and it's, well, we haven't had to raise the rates. Well, it's not just about raising the rates, it's about, is this a losing proposition or not? Are we losing money? And so if we're losing money, who is that? Who are we hurting? We're hurting us, we're making less money. Because of that, our members are like making less money, both in allocations, which they'll get in 20 years, but they'll still get it. And being able to put money into our mitigation fund, either fire mitigation or the
Rates.
thank you. So it's, what I'm saying is every dollar does make a difference. It doesn't necessarily have to kick into a rate increase for it to have an impact on them. So that's the point I was trying to get out there.
Anything else?
Sure. Sure.
It's not on finance, so,
can we go back to the dashboard, do you mind?
yeah, no, that's
Okay.
what the other question on.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
And I think we're on slide 8, unless you had a question on 7, Jeff?
Well, my question is, I'm not sure it would fit. My question is, we haven't seen a social media report in 2 or 3 months, I think. And just kind of curious what happened.
I think it's on page 12 in the appendix. Amanda, do you know where that is?
I don't, I'm happy to look. The social comments are being used as a result of an outage. We do not have a social media report in this dashboard.
Right, and we used to have, we get how many Facebook looks we had and Twitter
Right.
and stuff, and I have not seen that in a while.
Okay, we'll go back and I think with some of the change out, that may have been lost. So Amanda, we'll look at the last dashboards and add that back in. Yep, I'm happy to do that. Okay, so Drew, can you go to page 11, please? All right, so we have a couple new items under the grants. As you can see, it says new. We do have the final grant loan applications have been submitted for the USDA Power and Affordable Clean Energy, the PACE grant, which is a lot of work. But it is a big dollar amount too. And then we are awaiting a response to our letter of interest to see if we're able to move forward with the ERA grant for the 25 megawatts of solar generation. So those are new. And then another actually new one is that Drew and his team have applied for additional money through the Rural Municipal Utility Cybersecurity Program. This is a competition where we can receive cash prizes to help us with technical assistance on cyber. That's a good one. I know, it's kind of weird. Okay, and then the control over 3,000 kilowatts, we're way ahead of schedule, thanks to Dan and his team. And then I think a lot of you have seen, and we actually sent out an invitation, the Habitat for Humanity had a EE open house. We'll do more of that once the construction is completed and our systems are online. And we'll have another event and press release coming out after that is successful. So that's a great effort. And we'll be looking to do more of those. And then I will transition over now to Dan to get the solar unless there's any other questions. Yes.
So I'm just curious to note about the electric school bus was sent to Denver. And I guess that sort of says, are they not reliable? And really, you have to go to Denver for repair?
Yeah, Dan, you want to talk about that?
The challenge we certainly have, this was version 1.0 that we were working with, now in version 2.0. That we're hoping has a lot more of the bugs worked out, but they do come down here whenever they can fix some things, but it means like heavy parts moved out. And it's weird, it's oftentimes firmware type of things and like that, they just can't do here for some reason, but yeah.
It's not Microsoft Office running.
No.
That would be really scary.
Even some of the stuff I put in my own home, that I'm thinking, oh, this is latest, sure is matured by now. And, there's always, it takes a while for a product to become real mainstream and stable. Working on it every day.
But they sent a whole bus to Denver?
For the second or third time.
Wow.
Who's the power truck?
We not have piece of fire.
Which is why we just can't, we just didn't have that asset again.
All right, thank you.
Oh, come up here so Rachel can hear a little better. This was a presentation we just gave to the Board of County Commissioners earlier, last week.
Yeah.
And just to let them know, because they've approached us about some of the challenges they have ahead of them and been very interested in our project, of course, to the permitting side of things. So talk to them about this presentation. Just thought we wanted to share that with you to let you know our current thinking. We still got a ways to develop this. This is like very initial stages that we wanted to go through with you on that.
Is this in our packet?
Did that? I don't think it did. These are just a couple quick slides there. We can put this on the board on the Google Drive for you to get to those.
Yeah, we should put that, that should have been in the packet. Anything we present should be in the packet, so apologize for some things missing. The only thing that is definitely not going in your packet though is our presentation during executive session. And we did not email that around. So, but just a little more context on this, again, the reason we went to the commission is because as we talked to before, they have, I'm not gonna say the exact number, but in the millions, available potentially for, us to use for this project. So they just wanted an initial update on this. Once we get clarity from the commission, if they will approve of us using that money, then we come back to the board and we talk about the development of solar shares and how that looks. So we've not created, we're still kind of a long ways from that. We're just trying to put the pieces together to figure out what would the cost of the shares be, so that we can come back to all of you to talk further about that. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this is just some very high level things. We're going to go through some examples on here too, but first, where the site is located, I'm sure you guys are all aware where our Sunnyside substation is, next to Sunnyside School in the lower left of that picture. And there's a transmission line just north of that square that says Sunnyside Community Solar that comes into our substation. That's the block that's there, and that's where the site's being located on our 55-acre parcel that we bought a couple of years ago. And here are some of the stats about the Sunnyside Solar. We're showing pictures as things that evolved. I call this the drive-in movie theater stage, where we just had a bunch of posts out there. And the key thing to notice too is the vegetation below there is still in place. It's just a matter of driving the piles in place there. So we're talking a footprint of about 9 acres, that area that I had boxed out earlier, 3,600 panels. We have some DC capacity and then some AC capacity. Rate AC is what actually comes back onto our system through the inverters, 1.7 megawatts. Our amount of energy that we're generating, the key thing is that's enough to power about 600 homes. Okay. This picture is not of our solar garden, but we envision having green grass underneath it in the spring and summertime.
Is that an and or an or when you have the DC versus AC?
It's two different rates. So DC, that's how many panels there are, and AC, so there's inefficiency after the conversion of power. And sometimes you strategically size your inverters lower so you get a nice level load shape too. So really, for the intents and purposes of what we're talking about this side, think AC 1.7 megawatts.
Sorry to interrupt. Is there any way to share the presentation on the Zoom screen?
Oh, I thought it was being shared.
Stand by.
Sorry, Rachel.
How's that?
That's okay. Thank you. It's up now.
All right. Then the premise of the community solar garden is the whole concept there, because we could have just put this installation in and it just be part of our power portfolio. This is just a different way to essentially assign and let people subscribe to these little pieces of a solar garden and afford people the opportunity who cannot or do not want to put solar on their premise to still be able to participate in something like this. And the typical model would be they would subscribe to a share of the garden. So let's say there's just 100 panels out there, and somebody says, "Hey, I would like to buy, to purchase a subscription to one of those." Then they would get 1% of the total output, proportionate share. So we say, "Oh, this month this solar garden produced 1,000 kilowatt hours, and you get 10. You get your 1%." Okay. This is yet another phase where they've now have put the trackers in place and started to mount some panels on the thing. But our thought on this, and what you're seeing here, this is, you're sort of looking at one half of the array. On the left side, you're sort of seeing some trenches, and on the other side of those trenches is an equal portion there. So there's actually two portions there. And it illustrates very well the 50% split that we're considering on the structure of our program. We are definitely trying to maximize IRA funding for this. And so there's a 30% base funding there that we're trying with some safe harboring mechanisms to get some things in place there when we initially purchased the panels. But there's a little bonus adders too. And so if you're energy community, which I believe this will qualify for due to some shutting down of some coal mines. This could qualify for an extra 10% to the energy community. And also if you get things structured properly for a low moderate income type of program with at least 50% of the system, then you could qualify for another 10%. And we all think we understand these. We've put this past our auditors. I'll say that the real source of truth will come when we file or submit for the actual refund. So the way this is looking at, if you look at those two sides, if one half pays a little more for their subscription, let's say they buy a subscription and it entitles them to a certain number of kilowatt hours, and that's maybe a little more than they would pay on their electric bill, then that helps me fund the other half, which might be a more low moderate income type of side, so we can provide discounted subscriptions to that side. It is the idea there.
So is there ownership after, at some point, like the way that you would benefit from panels?
Probably not, but we'd set up like 20-year type contracts. And it also depends greatly on how you structure it on the front end. For low moderate income, I don't want to set up a barrier of saying your subscription is one giant upfront payment and you essentially bought those panels. Sometimes gardens are set up that way. You pay me $5,000, you owe you have rights to these panels. That is right. Or you can say it's just going to be an ongoing $30, $50 a month, something like that. And for $50 a month, low income might get $60 of power generation out of it.
It seems like we're kind of sticking with like the rent versus own model that is part of the inequality anyways, which is like you never benefit from, after you own the asset and you have that equity.
Well, and so this isn't like a house where after 20 years, you've got, something that's appreciated. Typically the life expectancy of a solar array might be the 25 type of range, 25-year type of range. So it could be after 25 years, you're looking at totally refurbishing the site, recycling what's there, replacing or something along those lines. So there's nothing that somebody could walk away with.
Right.
And on at the end. So, let's see, and we're trying to keep this also just economical because of our scale, because of the discounts to what it would be comparable to and putting on solar on your roof. So we want to try to get that market well. And yes.
It's more like a lease rather than a purchase, you're leasing.
Yeah.
Those over a period of time.
And I don't want to say that is the way, that's wrong, that is a model that would.
Yeah, well, we have to be careful because in the state of Washington, you could not let people own it because then it came into state tax law issues. So we're gonna have to dig into the state of Colorado laws more. So that's the part where we still need to bring that part to the board. We're out to research, that's what I'm trying to say. So we'll research it more. And then get back to the report.
You're just introducing these ideas at this stage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is all just, we're looking at things.
So it's really just
It's not the moment to dig in.
No,
Okay.
all we're showing, thank you. This is just to show you what we presented to the county so they could make a decision to give us a grant. And they just wanted a cursory preliminary idea. You're right, this is not the time to dig in. We're actually gonna probably bring this to back to dig in more at that level and then bring it to the bottom.
So this was, yes, did you have a question, John? No, okay. So, that was like the low income side. Maybe the other side, could have a different type of structure because they maybe don't have those initial entry barriers. In fact, the county would be an entity that says, hey, we'd like a subscription to this, but the way our financing mechanism works, I got this big lump sum of money up front right now. Can I just sort of, pre-purchase that type of subscription right now? I can give you this whole amount of funding right now, and maybe thank you very much. This entitles you to X percentage of the array. Things like that is what we're talking about.
So what kind of guidance did the board give staff for this proposal to be exported?
Kind of guidance. So this has been our local renewable project that we've added to our system. The board has approved the creation of this. And under policy 119, it had to be set up as a community solar garden initiative.
Take salt line, the LMI adder goes through a separate process, and you have significant lead time to get approved for that LMI adder. It's different than the community, the energy community adder. So if you're looking at placing service, you want to be well ahead of like 10, 12 weeks ahead of that.
Okay.
I'm sure read you in on that.
I'd love to gain whatever we can on that.
Absolutely.
Perfect, thank you. So that's that. Drew, why don't you go on to the next slide there? And so one of the things that we were talking about with LaPlata County here is an example of some things that can happen, because their main thing they're trying to accomplish are, I don't know if you're familiar with the benchmark and building performance standards that is coming around Colorado, that any building that has more than 50,000 square feet is going to be required to meet certain energy efficiency standards, greenhouse gas emission standards. And each different type of building has a different type of standard. The jail facility, jails are a specific category that have a specific amount of criteria. So the county has a couple of buildings that fit in these categories, the county courthouse and the jail facility. And so we were talking about some of that. Go ahead, Drew. Then I sort of hit on that one more time. Then there's an interesting caveat, so how can renewable be used to meet those criteria of the building efficiency standards? And there's some details in there we went over with the county that they first have to exhaust all the low-hanging fruit options. Like if you have LEDs to convert, you gotta make sure you do that first, maybe some building envelope improvements. And then you can consider renewable either through renewables on your roof or through solar garden subscription. And the example was the county jail uses about 100,000 kilowatt hours a month, which is equivalent to about 150 homes. Andrew, that could take the shape of 4,250 shares. Go ahead, and that'd be enough to cover the entire jail facility, which may not be necessary to meet those requirements. So those are still somewhat being developed. And the idea would be if they did need those 150 shares, whatever they contributed through their upfront payment would be enough to help offset on the other half, the 150 homes. So it's not, I'm not asking for member money to fund that, it's all self-contained. If somebody wants to contribute that, then that can be used over here and provide a discount on that. And then this was just sort of the final status just before the snow came on Thanksgiving, or day after Thanksgiving, on where we sat with that. So things are getting wrapped up there, and it's great while Travis is out there doing his drone footage of the panels. He can hover over the top of the transmission line and the substations with the thermal imaging turned on, looking for hotspots while we're out there. So that all works out pretty well. And that was the last slide.
Just a comment, we talk a lot about financial impacts, but I really hope we emphasize that, every watt we can generate with a solar panel is one less watt we have to buy with coal power. And sometimes I worry that we get lost talking too much about, the social equity, which I agree with, but it helps everyone if we're doing anything we can do to reduce greenhouse gases.
And just one quick summary, the reason why we're trying to structure things like this is to maximize the amount of capabilities that we have, trying to get this underneath our existing tri-state contract has to be structured a certain way. Trying to take advantage of the extra adders that are out there for the IRA, we have to structure a certain way. So we see this as getting the most overall bang for the buck for the membership. So that's why I was considering those types of things.
So it seems like there are several key decisions really yet to be made around this. So I guess my question is, to what extent should the board direct goals or outcomes that they would like to see from this investment within the context of those decisions that yet to be made. I'm not. I don't want us to be in a position of having a limitation by virtue of the decision being made before we set some criteria around what it is that we're trying to achieve with this.
Yeah, and I would say that we have, as Dan mentioned, there are really strict laws and requirements around how we do have to structure it if we want the funding. And so what I would suggest is we put together a proposal using what, like even John said, there's really strict requirements for if you wanted to be LMI considered and get additional grant money, you have to structure the project this way. So I would suggest we put out there what the stipulations are on the grant dollars. In addition to if the county is going to give us millions of dollars to help pay for this, we should get what their requirements are, which is some of the stuff we showed, and then bring it to the board as a starting point. Because otherwise we'll lose money if we don't.
And when we model this, we're under the assumption that we're not going to get the LMI, that we're not going to get the energy community. If we do that, great. But our modeling is such that we're not really think. We do, as John had mentioned, there's probably some hidden complications and everything I know about, and we just want to make sure.
What's LMI?
A low moderate income. So.
However, I mean, there are those regulations, laws, whatever that you're talking about. There's also, what is it that we're trying as a board in concept? Whether we agree with whether or not, right? And we could say, okay, we don't need that grant. We could still make decisions around it. What I'm concerned about is this is a train that's well out of the station, and I'm highly supportive of community solar garden, but it doesn't seem to have an engineer, a conductor, whatever you want to call it, whoever's the station master, sort of telling us what the destination is, right? It's on a track, we like the track, but I'm not sure where the destination is. And that's not a criticism, it's just sort of, I understand this is evolving, but I think it's useful for us to get that sooner than later, so that we can say, oh, that's the station we would like to go to, or not. I've already heard here within the board some discussion about, well, do we want to go social equity, is what he said, versus financial return or something. I don't think we've had that discussion. And I think it's worth us to do that and to come to some agreements in order. Is this really where I want to go? And I'm not putting an opinion out that we should go or not yet, but that we should have the discussion and come to some agreement. That's it.
Well, that's to my point on what guidance did you get from us? It was to buy some land and put a solar array. And now it's very focused. And so I believe the same thing, that we need to know which way we're going with.
Right. And under the policy 119 that we started as a project under, it had to be framed as a community solar.
Yeah.
That was.
That's not what this briefing is.
Well, no, I mean, keep in mind, what we're briefing you is the initial ideas that the county needed, so we could better give you. So our job is to.
So that's an trigger
This conversation. The point was, we needed to get as many facts as possible to you. And then, to your point, Tim, absolutely, we need direction from the board. And so please don't take this for anything else than what it is we just needed to gather the facts for the board to see. Because I wanted to know how much money are we gonna get from the county, because that's definitely gonna play into how you as the board want to structure the shares. I need the facts. I can't just come to you with theoretical ideas. I want the facts. So that's what this was. As John said, the point of bringing this was to tee this initial discussion. We'll definitely come back to the board to say, okay, where do you want to go? What is the policy of the board? We would like to know. Is it your priority to reduce carbon? Understanding there's going to be a cost shift? You know, it would be nice to know. And that goes back to John's email for the net metering.
Yeah, so
Sure.
Yeah, seriously, we came up with one. Yeah, I make sure that I'm gonna do my grown-up act. I wanted to offer, because I was fairly involved in some of the decisions that led to the community solar garden, to your comment. It was exactly as Dan said, these guys got very clear guidance to execute against policy 119. To build, it was very well defined. It's very well documented if you want to go dig it out from 3 or 4 years ago. So I don't think that there's anything there that we need to revisit. However, I think this is a super constructive presentation because it tees up the final step in these processes, which they don't have clear guidance on, which is, okay, the thing is just about built, it's scheduled to be placed in service in June, give or take. So we need to decide how we want to credit the member, how we want to use the energy that we produce. And that's a policy matter, and that for them to define the program. And I think the way that I would like to see it, and the way I've seen it work really well for this board, is to come with 2 or 3 scenarios that are optimized against 2 or 3 different outcomes. One is, maximize the benefit for our low and medium income members. Another one is peanut butter, everybody gets a little bit. Another one is least dollars spent per kilowatt installed. There's like 3 or 4 scenarios that will dictate how they finalize the program. And I think if we got scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3, scenario 4, I think we'd be in a good position to provide that guidance. But it's coming up fast. And even if you get a decision, I mean, you would really need a decision by sort of March, April. From us to be able to implement the software and the billing changes that you would need.
Right.
Yeah.
I threw that June 24 number out there to the county, put something low out there. I mean,
But you think it's coming?
they could have things going. They're working out there today.
But Dan, the point is that you can put a program in place at any time. I mean, we could start dumping energy on the grid and just leave it at that.
That's what I was getting to. Yeah. Is that, yeah.
Just to make sure we get it right.
Yeah.
Or what kind?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my concluding comment there was, the board does have some work to do.
Yeah.
We do have to provide you guys with some guidance so you can finalize your program. And my offer was, in this particular case, since it's a relatively narrow set of decisions with a relatively narrow set of options, I think 3 or 4 scenarios that we can review probably down in the back. We should be able to get us there.
Yeah, that'd be great. Looking forward to it.
But that was a suggestion, not a call.
Just to clarify, presentation of county is like a presentation to a potential investor. Okay? Someone's offering some unspecified sum in participation. We would need to know what their expectation is.
Yeah.
Right, in return, whether we don't factor in, do we want to take that, and if we do, how do we meet what that expectation is, along with whatever else the board feels is important.
This is the 50%, so the county wants to provide 50% assigned to get the money. Who's that?
No, I mean,
No, that's be defined.
yeah, that's to be defined. We don't know yet. That's why.
Because the outline has to be, or
Exactly.
it does not require allocation.
Yeah, so Dan warned me that there's some, yes, we got that. So that's what we need for fun. Sure.
Yeah, it'll- okay.
Yeah.
This belongs down there, this belongs, it belongs. It belongs down fast. Yes.
I think it's a great idea because it's dealing with dollars and money and I believe so.
It belongs down in somebody's committee.
Yeah,
I think the fact is what we do.
yeah.
Yeah, before we move on, I'll just maybe tag on to Tim's comment. And in a much more general sense, just kind of suggest or own that maybe in recent history, the board hasn't done a great job of getting in front of the train, so to speak, or, you know, getting the right conductor on the train. Yeah, we don't want to get in front of the train. Don't, no matter who's leading this, don't let it go in front of the train. But in a very generic sense, I think, we need to do better at that. And whether that's, you know, assigning this to the FAC or another committee or, you know, the full board in some sense. You know, I've heard from board members over the last quite a bit of time, you know, that we haven't thought through, you know, strategy. You know, so we're giving direction or accepting guidance from staff, probably without a real good basis for what we think as a board. And so this is like, it's a bit of an aha moment for me. I mean, it's not just right now the aha moment, but over the last month or so, a lot of different topics have come up that have lent themselves to that same sort of analysis that you're providing or bringing up, Tim, that we got to make sure we're in front of this so that staff doesn't go in lots of different unnecessary directions. And when staff does go in a direction, it feels good and we can be confident with the result. So that's sort of, you know, just a recognition of where I think we might not be getting it quite right. And on top of that, then a commitment from my seat to really focus on that, you know, and I don't know exactly if the answer is more stuff to the FAC, more stuff to the COP, a full, you know, full board strategy, probably many of those things roll together. But just, you know, just to make it clear that aha moment has occurred and that I think we need to do better in that. So I think we can move on then to next agenda item, board action items, starting with Finance and Audit Committee. Tim, you have a long list there. You want to?
All right, I mean,
And I think the first three are in the appropriate order. Are you seeing those, Tim?
just one second.
Okay.
Right. Got it. So, do you want me to lead this? Okay.
I would love for you to lead it to the extent that it's, you know, right in your wheelhouse. And if it's not, we'll probably, you know, toss it over to Graham or something like that. So Patrick.
So these are all just items, things.
Right.
Little things.
Sent this or?
Okay, so the Finance and Audit Committee, you all got a copy of the report. A lot of the discussion occurred in executive sessions, so I can't really discuss that publicly here. But essentially, in the examination of the first item, of which there is action required, which is a motion to approve LPEA's 2024 tri-state pass-through rate tariffs, that FAC was unanimous in recommending that we do that. We've had that presentation, all of us, within the context of the committee of the whole meeting, and there was, it's been discussed more than once, more than one FAC meeting. So I think it'd probably be best, and we could do that if you want from the committee, since it recommended that the motion to approve the LPEA's 2024 tri-state pass-through rate tariffs is on the table as a motion, doesn't need a second, and so we can engage in discussion. Right?
Yeah, that'd be right under reference rules, right, when the committee returns a report that it's been delegated, it can sort of immediately go into a motion.
So let's take that one's the easy one, right? So.
Questions?
Yeah, question. So, help me remember how much of the discussion that we have had on this has been in executive session versus in open session. I'm just trying to know what's going to be documented as far as the discussion that was had about, okay, do we want to increase our equity percentage? Do we want to, what about a net, you know, all of that stuff is that all just buried now because it was an executive session? Because, well, was that open? I mean, I didn't go back and look at the movies.
So. I mean, my recollection. And be faulty at times, is that was most of the executive was in the context of the budget discussion, which we fought right into that. But the actual tariffs, everything that resulted from that is public, right? So, and it's in the packet and it will be publicly available, right? So be posted, right? And I think it has already been publicly posted, right? So the detail of this tariff has been there for member use and for other discussion as much for the last 30 days roughly. So, you know, there's nothing that you would be able, that's confidential regarding the actual published rates that we don't have to. We have to keep it confidential, right? Does that help?
I'll second the motion, so we can discuss.
It's already been.
It's sort of a unique thing when it returns from a committee, it sort of becomes a motion of itself. Yeah.
Discussion is open.
Okay,
Thank you.
I have a question. What kind of comments did we get back from publication?
I was gonna just sort of go along that off of Kirsten's comment about publicity of this in general, right? It has been publicized. We didn't get
We have a comment.
but that wasn't even related to this. That was the other tariff, wasn't it?
No, it
No,
was,
it was
asking about 8 and 9, but it was on this tariff.
So we did get one on it, and it was shared in the drive. It was a question that sort of concerned.
And it was, and we responded to it in the drive.
But just the one.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sorry, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the last time we made this vote, it was just posting, but this would be actually where we would express dissent in the tariff.
You're basically voting to make this tariff effective, not just posting for public comment.
Right.
This would be a vote for yes or no, we want this tariff.
That's a good discussion. Yeah, the discussion. So yeah, if you want to articulate that.
Yeah,
Now is the time.
you know, the same concerns I had before with the rate structure. I feel like when I think about our future, we should be moving to more of a distribution model. So I thought base charge should be higher, and I think to combat that, I also think time of use is going to become more and more important as we are able to be more nimble with purchasing power. So I really liked the idea of we had a higher base charge, and if that was an undue hardship, then we allowed people to go back to a time of use charge that would be at the current base that we have as a way to incentivize where I think the direction should be.
And did we end up there?
Yes, we did.
Your understanding? Well,
Well, it wasn't as significant as I thought it should be higher.
yeah, the base charge piece.
Yeah,
Right. But we did keep the time of use base charge. The number that the previous base charge was.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it would, I thought a greater incentive would be at a higher increase to our base charge.
Which one?
Oh, now Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, well, just following up, but if I'm time of use, if I'm reading it right, I'm on the rate adjustment. Yeah, it was 20 last year, and we're proposing to raise it to 2150. So just following up on that. And you're saying, Nicole, that's not, you want it flat or less than present base charge?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I wanted it to be, so most people are not on time of use. So I say we increase our base charge for our general residential, and then we would keep that. I think it's fine that we move that base charge for time of use to the 2150, which is what people are used to paying, right, in order to incentivize people to move into time of use.
Got it. And I think I will say I see that long-term strategy, and I also, it's that funny balance where to really take advantage of time of use, it's like fancy appliances and things with timers, and those are hard to access. So there's an interesting phase and approach, but really good points. My question, it was just a clarification on the member comment, and then I have a larger question about rate stabilization fund. Dan, on your response to the member comment, which was an inquiry about the AMI opt-out folks, I was trying to understand, it was very clear initially, like, oh, okay, this is because you don't have a peak, there's no way to charge peak, we're rolling that into base charge. But then at the end, it says, there's like one line that says something about trying to also recoup our increased cost to read your meter. That was the very last line. I'll try to bounce back. So I was just trying to figure out, is it a both and, or is it really, it's trying to capture peak?
So it's and. It's capturing the peak and it costs us more to read an opt-out meter. So with AMI, I don't have to drive out there. When they opt out, we have to drive out there. And so that extra $10 a month helps to cover our expense to drive out there and read that meter.
Okay.
So it is by design going to cost a person more to be on the opt-out rate.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I just wasn't quite sure based on the wording. Thank you. And then the second was following up on the rate stabilization fund as it's relevant to our current, what we're currently looking at for passing this pass-through piece. And so I know there's an upcoming proposal about the rate stabilization fund. I know we have the rate stabilization fund, and have we considered using it to help balance out this current increase or like the pass-through increase at all? And if not, why not? If so, great.
So I can just recap what I think I heard you ask is, given the current proposed published rate, should we consider using funds out of the current rate stabilization fund to somehow lower those costs? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Was it considered?
Oh, and was it considered? I'm not sure to what extent it was considered specifically, but the basic premise behind this was, let's not raise rates to our members for our own utilization and purposes, right? So this is not a rate increase from LPEA in principle. It is to accommodate the rate increase that is being passed to us by Tri-State, right? So if Tri-State's the rate increase were not to happen, we would not be having this discussion at this point, right? So that's the basic premise that we're operating on in producing this proposal. Does that help answer your question? Did that address it?
Yes, I mean, I know why we're presenting this and I have all that. I guess I'm just, especially for the listening public who at the end, you know, it's a change in their bill, regardless of whether it's due to a Tri-State or something we're doing. So I'm just trying to understand, you know, we put that stabilization fund in place to support our membership and cushion potential future rate hikes. And so just trying to understand if we considered using it at all in this instance. And it sounds like it wasn't really examined for this particular recommendation.
Hey, Rachel, so we examined it pretty in depth, actually. And what it would do is it exhausts the rate stabilization fund pretty quickly, because it's going to be a rate increase every year.
Right.
In fact, we just got an analysis yesterday that potentially shows, and it's actually apparently it's in Tri-State's ERP they submitted, which is hundreds of pages. So we're not exactly sure. We think we found the document, but it's been discussed amongst the CEOs and all the other co-ops that Tri-State's proposing a 4.5% rate increase every year from now until 2033. So if you use our rate stabilization we're exhausting it completely on tri-state's rates. I fundamentally don't think that's the correct way to use member money in this regard, because it should be used for emergencies that Tim brought up before. It should also be used to potentially mitigate a rate increase that La Plata Electric needs ourselves. So, and if you go ahead and use it this year, then how are you you're gonna have to raise rates next year and then the year after that, because you will be out of this money.
I think I just needed that articulated and wanted to articulate in public session. I think that's important. And it's also helpful to be reminded that, you know, this really came about, I think, right after the Texas ERCOT. Everyone saw these massive spikes or something, and we're looking at a potential power supply that might future wherein there's more fluctuation. It's not these, and it's to kind of smooth those bumps out. And so, yeah, I just thank you for sharing, and it's helpful to know it was considered, and I figured it would have gotten evaporated really quickly, but just I appreciate you sharing that out.
As I understand it, there won't be any changes to anybody's bill till the tri-state rate change is approved.
Yes.
And we've already voted on the structure when we went to publish it. If we do any changes about the new publish to do this.
Well, under policy 364, we can adopt something that's different than we published, so we don't have to go through the re-publishing part. We'll speak to that. What you pass today doesn't have to be identical to what was published before the public comment period.
Okay, thank you. I'll call for the question.
Just, well, we've had a call for the question motion, so we have to immediately, is there a second on the call for the question?
Oh, do we need one? Is there?
Yeah, it has to be second, it has to be two-thirds to call the question. So there's a call for the question. Is there a second? Seems that the call question is going to fail for that, doesn't it?
Keep going then.
You made the point of, this will or will not be implemented until the FERC approves tri-state rate increase. I just want to verify.
So here's the problem. FERC has a statutory obligation to rule within 60 days. That obligation is coming up any day now. They could deny the rate. If they deny the rate, yes, we would quickly move some process to stop the rate to going into effect January 1st. What I've asked Graham to do though, is I really need our attorneys to figure out if it's denied, then can tri-state, they can resubmit, but can they go ahead and backdate it to January 1st? Because our feeling is that we should go ahead and increase rates January 1st. And then, because I would rather get the money in January instead of not, and then in February having to over collect, right? I'd rather get a refund if the rate is going to be denied versus collecting double in a winter month that is already hard for numbers. Does that clarify? Okay.
Great. Other questions? Color? Mine's a little bit off, but just a couple of details on it. I have this on page 16 of the document, page 56 and 132. It's the time of use 3-phase. And in that one, there is a demand charge. And Dan, could you talk a little bit about that demand charge when that occurs? And also, would you mind just kind of briefing us on the power factor? That's through a couple of these different things. And I kind of like a little background on that power factor.
Yeah, so there's the demand charge on the commercial time of use rate. You know, if you properly do the rate design, we have fixed charges and fixed costs. And so that demand charge is really there to recover our facilities that are around. On and off peak, that's where we're capturing tri-state's demand charge to us, so to speak. And so you can look at the demand charge paying for our facilities, the on-peak charge covering tri-state's demand charge to us. So it's just a way to split it out more granular, more accurate, to collect that way. Okay, that makes sense.
It's only on that one.
It's not complicated to try to put something like that on a residential bill. Okay. Trying to keep some very clear guidelines on, or very clear things for residential. That's a little bit of the art where it comes in, the rate maintenance side of things. Then your other question on power factor clause, that typically only comes into play on commercial type of businesses where they have large motor loads and those types of things. And Tri-State's rate tariff to us does have a clause in it that mimics that one, that says, well, Colorado Electric's power factor is so far out of whack, they can charge us to correct that. And, you know, and then if they did that to us, we would turn around and do that. We just haven't had to implement that at this point yet.
And then we've had that previously, right?
Yes, that's been there the whole entire time.
Thank you. Any questions?
Not a question, but I just wanted to, yeah, in advocating for a different rate structure. What I didn't say, that I meant to say is, you know, as we become, you know, if we think about our future as more solar, you know, you could really imagine that you're like, time of use becomes more and more pertinent to our business model.
So, let me just clarify, are you suggesting that we should change the schedule?
Well, I'm just saying I'm gonna vote against it because I haven't changed what I said.
Okay,
And I just.
so you don't want to make a motion to propose a change or anything like that? You're just going to be in opposition to what is there and hope for a discussion later, is that?
Well, I mean, I feel like when we voted on it before, there wasn't interest in what I was advocating, so I didn't even consider putting it out there again, but I kind of wanted to plant the seed for, you know, when we think about this.
Just kind of clarify what we know.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Anyone else? Is that a hand up? Okay, thank you.
So the reason for the base charge increase, one of the reasons was because we still seriously undercollect on our base charge. And the original staff recommendation for the tariff was to have a higher base charge, and that got clawed back. And I'm with you, I think that higher base charge was a good idea. I had some concerns about LMI and how that affects things, and I've been educated on that and how the demand hour affects things. So just so that we can get it clear, I'm gonna put a motion out that we change the residential base charge to the original staff recommendation. And I'm sorry, I don't remember what that was, last 25. And fully knowing that it's gonna get cut down, but I wanted, you know, we did, there was a lot of discussion about it. There was discussion during the budget phase of it. And that impact and this impact, and it just all gets kind of lost when we give up. So I don't want to give up. So that's my motion.
So we have a subsidiary motion to amend the base charge to $25, if I counted that correctly, so we would need a second on that, and I see Nicole seconded that, so now we move to discussion on the subsidiary motion.
So let me just clarify, that base charge change is related to another change within the whole table, which would alter both the peak rate, but not the energy charge. Right. So it would also have a commensurate peak rate reduction. Is that what you're suggesting? Is that part of your motion? Or are you just wanting to go to 25 for residential?
I'm not prepared to do the second piece of that. So I understand that there are ramifications of doing that one, and so we may have to fix it, but I just want to do this one, and then we can do the fallout.
So just to clarify, you're saying only raise, your motion only affects the base charge and increase from 23 to 24.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Rachel, you have your hand up. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I was just trying to find where that original proposal was. Does anyone know? Was it in the the October board packet or the November one?
Our committee of the whole, wasn't it? That we discussed?
Yes, so we committee the whole.
Be there, smaller back.
Thank you.
Previous ones.
And then that would have been under executive session. We discussed rates in executive session.
We discussed budget, this was the context, basically, of how we achieve it. Anyway. Question.
So if we just change the base charge and nothing else, that makes this more of an increase than we previously discussed, correct? By how much? Any idea?
It raised from 4% to 5.8%.
We don't change the.
So it's no longer a pass-through rating.
They had that.
It's an annual increase. More money in the coffers of LPEA. Not necessarily more expensive.
So maybe then we have to do the, do we know what the number, I don't remember what the original number is to make it still work for, to your point, thanks.
Steep power charge would be reduced from 230 to 273.
Okay, so may I?
To amend your,
Yes, and my proposal to change, basically go with the original staff recommendation on the residential base charge and the demand hour.
we have a second.
I don't understand. Are you withdrawing?
I think she's modifying her current motion
Should stay.
to sort of reflect both sides of this coin. Yeah, you want
Okay, I
to
withdraw
Yeah.
my previous motion.
restate it as.
And do I need to, does it the second need to withdraw, approve of that? Withdraw? I approve.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I would like to make a motion to have the residential base charge and the demand hour be the original staff proposal, which was $25 for the residential, and I'm sorry for the demand hour,
$273.
$2.73 for the demand hour. The peak.
Now we can debate the.
So now we have
The new motion. Yes, that's the new motion. So,
Nicole, what you said, by doing that, we again disincentivize time of use, correct? And I think we've talked extensively in here about trying to make that demand charge meaningful. So I would vote against this.
I'm gonna leave distance anyways. Cause we're all gone down.
You're cutting down, we're putting some responsibility on people, these were the exact words I think many of us use, to look at their energy consumption. And if we knock down what the rate is for that energy consumption, they can take less responsibility for what they're doing, and I think we're all trying to work that way.
So it had been $1.50 for that peak hour, and now it's going to $2.73, which is almost doubling that peak hour. I'm not sure I see the distance into there.
Just for your perspective and seeing. California struggled with this a lot, particularly Southern California, where their peak charges are brutal. It took enormous cost increases in peak energy usage to express itself in large dollar movements in the bill to get people to take action. You are correct, it incentivizes at 1%, 2%, 3% changes, that those are non-trivial changes. But to have a human being look up and say, what's my bill? What was my bill last month? Holy shit. Oh, turn that thing off, turn that off, turn the thing down. To cause that action, you needed, at least in California, you needed $50 and $100 price differences in people's bill before they took the time to understand TOU and change their family's behavior. I think you're going down the right path. I think you're underestimating how much money it takes to change people's behavior. And I offer that as a comment in support of where I believe Joe is going. And I think you would want to see plus $50. To get somebody in this community to actually get their kids to turn the air conditioning down. Thanks.
Rachel, you have your hand up again? Sorry, John, you finished?
I am, thank you.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand what John was saying. John, are you saying you're supporting what? It was muffled. Are you supporting what is being presented as an alternative, or you're saying it's not enough and so?
Relatively indifferent to it. I don't think it moves the needle. So either way, to answer your question on the vote, I'm indifferent to it. I don't think it's enough to move the needle. What I'm saying is, if you want to change people's behavior, you have to do what you're doing, offering Kirsten, and you have to do it significantly more aggressively. And I can help you find support for how aggressive that has to be. Happy to do that, but I think it's a distinction without a difference. So I'm happy to support whatever the group decides.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Any
And
other?
I guess my only
Okay.
other question, I still can't find I can't find the the original proposal that shows those graphs of how it impacts people.
I'll get you an email to you, Rachel.
Thank you.
However, we have a motion, second on the floor, we have to vote on, so I'm not sure if that will be timely. Apologize, Richard. Anyone else? So we would be voting on the amendment?
Yes,
At this point?
this vote is to, so the main motion was to adopt the tariff as presented by the FAC. We've had a subsidiary motion to amend that to, as stated, $25 base charge, charges as described. So the vote now would be whether or not to make that amendment.
And with that,
And then if it is amended, if it carries and it is amended, then it becomes the main motion. And we sort of have to have a subsequent vote on whether to adopt as amended.
If it fails, we have.
If it fails, then we go back to our original main motion, which was the tariff as presented by the FAC. Thanks for sort of explaining that further down the line. Is that?
That's what we-
Parliamentary.
All right, well then, I see no further discussion on the subsidiary motion or the amendment from Kirsten, so let's vote on that. Is that clear what we're voting on? It's just the amendment? Okay, so all in favor of the amendment, raise your hand, say aye.
Goes along, so.
Okay,
3 in favor.
all opposed to the amendment?
Eight against, and then I didn't see.
Landis abstains. She doesn't have information.
So that's it, okay, so that the amendment does not pass. And we're back to the main motion of approving or not approving the tariff as it stands. And any further discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and we'll vote on adopting the tariff as presented by the FAC and as published for public comment. All in favor, put your hand. And all opposed?
Rachel should be recording this.
Yes. Anyone opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, to oppose, and Rachel, we didn't get your vote.
I'm an abstainer again. I got swirled by all this.
Okay, so motion passes.
Can I just add, when we send this out to our members, I really want it to be communicated, hey, if you don't want to see a base charge increase.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Amanda, did you hear that?
Yep, it is included.
To incent people to go to time of use.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So now we'll just our.
You need a break.
Yeah, not what we'll call, he can join us at 10:50.
He's here, so, yeah, let's just take a 5-minute, well, I need consensus here. So what I'm gonna propose is 5-minute break, come back, we will go to, attorney update, public attorney update. But then I do propose, because we'll probably need Matt to go directly into executive session. And so we'll have to revert back to board action A2 after executive session. Any problem with that? Okay, final break. Okay, let's go ahead and crank this back up. As discussed before the break, we are gonna jump in the agenda down to what would be item 6, attorney update. I see your name up there, Matt. Can you hear us?
I can. Good morning.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Great. Nice to see you all. A couple brief updates before we go into executive session. LPEA has filed a breach of contract lawsuit against Tri-State in La Plata County. That lawsuit has been served on Tri-State. Tri-State now is on the clock to respond, file a motion to dismiss. That's due technically later this month. Could push to early next year if they require an extension. So that's where the lawsuit sits. So very early stages of that lawsuit. Second update as it relates to FERC. It looks like the CTP case is on the FERC agenda for its open meeting on Tuesday. And expect a decision on the CTP next week. So we'll see where that lands. There's going to be a lot of work on the back end as we try to decipher that and evaluate it and go through those steps. But it does appear that that is going to issue based on the sunshine notice that the agency issued last night. So 2 updates. That's the extent of what I have for public purposes. I could take any questions. To the extent we're going to discuss the lawsuit, I prefer to do that in executive session.
Matt, what happened last night? I'm sorry, I missed that.
So the sunshine notice came out for the FERC agenda for its open meeting this coming Tuesday, so December 19th. The CTP is an agenda item and expect an order to issue sometime next week, potentially even on Tuesday. So,
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
So Matt, that sunshine notice on the agenda and everything, we just have, I know you can't predict what will really happen, but is that a high probability that they will make a decision next week, a medium probability, low probability? What's the probability?
I think it's a high probability that there will be a decision next week.
Thank you.
Kirsten.
And is that what they are discussing next Tuesday? Does that have a number or a formula to get to a number in it? Or is it just a process?
I mean, I haven't seen the order, but with that caveat, I would expect that it's going to have a formula to be able to get to a number. I would be surprised if they were to issue something that had a, hard-coded value for each entity. But federal government, you never know.
Yes, but a formula, and hopefully a formula that can't be misinterpreted. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yep. Good question.
Any other open session questions for Matt? Okay, I don't see any. Then we'll go ahead and move to executive session. We'll excuse Kohler for the first part of the executive session, and then grab you for the second 2 items in executive session.
And who in staff are we including in that executive session?
Help me out.
Executive session.
Staff.
Hey, I mean, we're just gonna do.
Oh, so yeah, so actually, yeah, for staff in this room, it'll just be Dan, Harms, Graham, Patrick, and I.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so in order to do that, we need a motion to make that.
I move to enter an executive session.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. All in discussion? All in favor of going into executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Abstentions? Yeah, okay, it passes. We'll go ahead and start. executive session with us, Janelle. Welcome back, everybody. We are now back in regular board meeting. It does appear that we will have one action coming out of executive session. We have a motion. We will get a motion. Nicole?
Yes. I move that we withdraw LPEA membership representation on the tri-state board until further notice.
Thank you for the motion. Second. David, second. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of Nicole's motion to, as she stated, say aye.
Aye.
And all opposed? Or any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so we're looking back up to, oh, yes, Kohler.
I would just like to tell the board that it has been a real privilege to serve on the tri-state board. It's been an experience I wish all of you could share, and I thank you.
Thank you, Kohler.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's have a quick chat about how we're going to accomplish the rest of the agenda in an hour. You know, I really think that, and I'll take input on this, but I really think we should get through this net metering tariff vote conversation.
We need the roundup nominees, please.
We need that. We probably don't need the building.
We do building, please.
Do we? Okay. How about if we don't have reports? Is that a deal breaker? No, they are in where we're at.
Submitted,
Okay, so, yeah. All right, then we're gonna quit discussing and we're gonna get back to action. So we are back to you, Tim, on item 2 on FAC report, which is the motion to approve net metering qualifying city rate tariffs.
On item 2.
Item 2. Little item. Thank you. Caller.
And would you mind using page numbers, because everything's kind of bounced around so we can follow maybe our ways.
I'm gonna ask someone to help me with page numbers, but the answer to that question is yes.
I'm getting it.
Page 82. Believe.
Tim, you usually go by page number.
Are we in alpha 2? Are we in 5 alpha 2? That's gonna be page 82.
Thank you. For me, it's number 30.
Yeah, so Tim, this is brought forward by FAC.
Right, so I think the FEC have 3 discussions of this net proposal. We, I think, also discussed it some degree in Cal, perhaps. And at the last FAC meeting last week, we made a recommendation, which is this motion. The LPEA board adopt the net metering and qualifying facilities as presented to the FAC in the LPEA electric rates schedules dated December 15, 2023. So those are also included. So that motion is there. I don't believe it needs a second. And then it will be open for discussion or another motion of some sort. There has been discussion about that. So I'll open it up. Go ahead, John.
First, I would like to first apologize to the board, as I was unable to attend the FAC in a timely manner due to personal reasons unrelated to anything here. And as a result, was forced due to time limits to prepare my comments and provide my feedback very late in the process, really being frank, out of band from a process that was duly followed after multiple delays. And so for that, I apologize because it's basically jerks all you guys around and makes it hard for you guys to do your job. It's not my intention to do it that way. of course, again, because of time and some personal limitations, and it's, will endeavor not to do that again. Nevertheless, on the merits, I hope you take my comments and email into consideration as you make your own decisions. And then lastly, I would be, I think there was some concerns about, really sort of pushing the limits of what's appropriate in email. So I'd be happy to, have my letter added to the public record, read into it, or however would be comfortable. If anybody feels that that was too much back channel for comfort. Again, I said nothing that I wouldn't be comfortable saying. But there's no opening remark, but you're welcome. If you haven't read it, I'm happy to respond to that. Any comments there? But it's really taking function.
Other discussion, anyone else? Cool. Is there a rush to get this passed today? I saw your thing last night, I couldn't really absorb it. There's other things on my mind. And I think it needs to be kind of looked at. Is there a reason we have to pass this? I know we've been holding off, but my understanding, and just correct me, is that there is a desire to have this take effect January 1st. Is that a hard and fast requirement? I don't believe so, but I'm not letting off these.
So the issue we'd like today is to vote yes or no because we noticed it. That's the difference, is we noticed it to start January 1st. So we really need to let the public know if it's a yes or no.
So that would mean if we wanted to postpone it, right? Maybe another motion that would affect whether we vote yes or no. Of that motion that's there right now, right? So if someone were to make a motion to postpone this, or to not pass it and come back with a more comprehensive look or something like that, I'm trying to grasp it.
But let me try and interpret and clarify. I mean, Jessica's asking for a yes, no on this, I think, it's not a postpone. So I think if the intent, if there's not enough clarity here, if you read John's description, or if you had, this sort of aha moment or feeling yourself, I believe the answer is no at this point. There's nothing about voting no here that precludes, coming back to net metering in any way, in any time frame. So that's my feeling on where, what we're probably driving for here in terms of action. I think I actually already said this once in this meeting, and so, but I'm gonna say it again because it applies more here than it did in the previous time I brought it up. This has been in process for a long time. The board has worked with staff has worked with the board, staff has worked with the public. And so, staff did a great job. What I'm going to go back to is, I don't think the board did a good job in this respect. I think the board followed staff down a path. Found some places where I think the board, and when I say the board, I'm really more talking about FAC. I guess the board got to see this largely in the CAL, but the FAC's seen it quite a few times now.
And each time it has been posted and asked for board participation. So.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, not only from FAC, everyone's allowed to participate in those discussions. I didn't participate in FAC, but now that I know this has come up, I went back and watched the FAC video. But my point here is, I think staff went where we asked them to, and now some of us are looking at it and saying, well, is that really what we wanted? Staff did everything we asked, but did that get us where we wanted to be in the end? And my personal opinion is no, it didn't. I ran across a person in the solar industry, and I thought we were doing a great job here. And to be perfectly honest, they didn't say there was anything wrong with where we ended up on this thing. But they told me some stories about some things that weren't gonna happen that shocked. And I thought, man, that is not what I expected out of this tariff. And so now I need to rethink that. And that's where I'm at, is rethink. So, you know, I guess that's, if and when we rethink this, and I think it's sort of mandatory that we do, this is a big part of, you know, this net metering is, well, number one, it's mandated by law. But also a big part of how we, you know, how we deal with rates. That the board needs to do a better job of direction and guidance. And in order to do that, we have to discuss amongst ourselves what we want to see out of this. And, you know, I mean, Dan does a fantastic job with putting it together, and he gives us the charts and graphs, and it's pretty hard to say, you know, that's not adequate. But if we're not getting what we think we wanted out of it, we have to say we didn't put the right stuff in. So that's where I'm at on this. I'm totally willing to vote no on the current tariff, and take it up at a more involved board level, you know, ASAP. I know, you know, there are financial implications with doing this or not doing this, right? I mean, every month there's net metering that happens according to the existing tariff, not according to the new tariff. So we're living under the existing tariff until we make a change. So that to me is sort of the jeopardy we have. My evaluation is it's not significant jeopardy in relation to what the benefit we could have if we roll this out in a different way. So my soapbox, sorry.
Yeah.
John Lee, oh, let me get Rachel first. Sorry, John.
Thank you. Well, one just observation, we've said multiple times today, most all about rates or structures. Well, actually, it's all about net metering. Like, we need some strategy. So loud and clear, and I'm excited. You mentioned earlier, Ted, that you're going to kind of scratch your head and noodle around on how we're going to get there. So thank you. And then, so yeah, just thinking about the time question. I remember in talking with the solar installers, one of the reasons I guess they were nervous about this was it had something to do with we have a time cap on size of array, and it somehow messed with the time sensitive either IRA or USDA application. So if we kick this down the road, is that still in play? Or if we kind of stay with what we've got, is that null, that time concern they all expressed around this critical support that would let installs go in for our community?
That, sure, I can speak to that. The core issue is that with the USDA money that we're potentially eligible for has a sunset on it, and there's serious concern in the industry about regime change in 12 months. That would limit the amount of federal money available for any installer, residential or large scale. If we pass this current tariff, the proposed tariff, it would impose a 50 kilowatt, practical 50 kilowatt limit on the systems. So the school district, who is proposing a 1.2 megawatt build, would immediately clip their system down to 50 kilowatts, basically 5% of the original design size. In doing so, would forfeit, give or take, 50 to, well, really for them, it'll be closer to 80% of that money. And so they would lose, in that single instance, they would lose a couple $1 million in federal money. The same is true for and so that's the urgency. If you do nothing, if we turn down, if we deny this tariff, the size limit is not imposed, and the school district can move forward with their 1.2 megawatt system.
Okay, thanks.
Just to clarify, the school already applied, so they're not going to be impacted by this.
They're not.
Yeah.
They're
And the limit, there's no cap on 50 kilowatts. You can build as large as you want. The incentive is the part that changes.
Mm-hmm.
So the incentive, the bigger incentive is up to 50 kilowatts. There's another incentive past 50 to larger. I just didn't want the board not to know the facts of that part of it.
Okay, so, yeah, so if I have any part that's factually inaccurate, please correct me. I'm not trying to be doing any misdirection here.
And
It
then,
is cost, it is, sorry.
okay, so no, that's okay. So that's understanding on the incentive. So the install, the new builds on our grid. And then on our side, if we do nothing, right, we know what happens with the cost shift reduction over time with the various proposals we've looked at. We have, but this one's not filled in. Is there? So what, I guess I don't, if we do nothing to Ted's point, moving forward until we put something else in, we're operating with what we've got. And as I heard it, there was urgency to get infrastructure in the ground because of regime change and all these other bits and pieces. And so let's just say like, all solar gets dumped onto our grid, which is not bad. Sorry, dumped implies bad, but that's not the case. What's our, what are we looking at in terms of impact to our bottom line?
So Rachel, all those numbers are relative to where we are today. So if we don't change, there's no change from today. So those other numbers, like where it said 4 million, we could say 4 million over 10 years if that change is made. So currently we're about 1.9 million a year, and then that grows. There were some charts that were disseminated that showed the projected where we're going with that.
I think those were sent this morning, last night, late.
Yeah.
Okay. So it'll
So I
just
think
get
that when people
worse.
ask about the urgency for getting this through, it was in the email I sent, sorry it was so late, but there's a cost shift. But to Ted and John's point, it would be nice to get direction from the board, because what we thought we heard is we're trying to create a compromise or reducing the cost shift going to our members, including our low income members, but we're also trying to create an incentive for solar, recognizing we want to still support it. So that was where we thought we were going. So yes, if we don't do anything, it goes back, reverts to the original proposal, which is very good for solar installers. It's the best option, but it is also the option that creates the biggest cost shift to our members. But if the board chooses that as the path, then that's your decision. We will follow it.
But to be clear, it's not the biggest benefit to the installers, it's the biggest benefit to people who build solar.
Yes, sorry, you're right.
For $4.5 million, $4.X million. Ignoring the specifics of that, I'm advocating for a delay to modify the tariff, not to throw the tariff and do nothing. This is not a $4 million decision we're being asked to make. That would be spread over. We're looking at, I'm proposing that we do the work and bring in some experts, 60, 90 days to get what we want, get clarity from the board, have everybody get the time that they need to really understand the nuances of the issue, consolidate our opinions, submit that to the staff so that they can act with clarity, with clear guidance. This would cost is staff has offered that it would cost us some money, but it would cost us nothing near $4.5 million. It would be measured in whatever the incremental gain of the systems that got commissioned during or got NTP, but in the first 90 days during this period would be a tiny fraction, maybe measured in thousands of dollars, maybe low tens of thousands of dollars.
John, I have two questions. So if we pass this today, I'll ask first question first. If we pass this today, does this preclude doing more down the road to look at bigger systems, to set up other tariffs for, for systems over 50K?
It wouldn't, correct me if I'm speaking incorrectly, we can always revise tariffs, we can always add tariffs whenever we want. It would just close the door for everything that's in planning now that's above 50K. And yes, you can build whatever you want, but it is economically impractical to build above 50K. Period. Is that true?
Well, it doesn't economically impractical possibly, but doesn't close the door. We're trying to say, you can still put systems in 50 to whatever side you want, we're just not gonna subsidize.
Well, to be more precise on that, not only will you not subsidize it, you also will not allow any offset for your own generation.
Yeah.
So even if you install this thing on your own barn, you do not get, and you're generating and you're consuming energy on site in your barn. For those bigger systems, you do not get credit for any of it. It is purely ornamental.
It's all, you're getting $1 credit.
$1.
Yeah, it's not offsetting the usage. But other options are, I could only credit, and basically we only need to credit what we're receiving as a benefit.
Right, but at 5 cents,
And which is more than we're receiving as a benefit.
So for the qualifying facility, we're paying 5 cents. The first 25, give or take 25% to a third of that needs to be, of that money goes to pay just to have the interconnection fee. And the remaining money doesn't cover the amortized cost of what you would pay to build the system. You would literally lose money each month for the privilege of having this system.
And then that's the discussion I think that needs to be had is it LPEA's job to make a system work or to pay for what the system's worth?
And today's system makes today's proposed tariff, because it is economically infeasible. You lose money from 50K up. Nobody would ever do it. Therefore, the effective result is a 50K cap. So hang on, is that an accurate statement?
I cannot speak to the other people's, what the economics are to make it work. But yeah, you would have to have a system that you have very optimally, everything go right. But yeah, small systems are hard to make work. That's why we focus on bigger systems.
But there are other, and I guess talking about a private company now, there are other tax incentives, federal, state, that they receive besides the tariff that we would impose. There's other ways for them to cut their costs, correct?
That is correct, and calculating all of those incentives. Even with you calculating the IRA incentive and the depreciation, it still doesn't pencil for 5 cents.
Okay. And then my second question was, so you're talking about bringing someone in. What sort of things could they offer? Can you give us any examples of the kind of things that they might present?
Sure. So there is literally nothing that LPEA will tackle that hasn't been tackled many, many times throughout the rest of the country. So all of the issues for writing a good tariff, there are plenty of best practices, including quite a few terrible practices. A consultant who is an expert and knowledgeable in the subject of net energy metering NEM tariffs, like what we're proposing here, can bring all of those best practices and interview each and every one of us and go, what are you trying to get done here? Are you trying to optimize for maximum installation? Are you trying to optimize for lowest dollar cost average to the membership, empowering X, Y, Z, and then collectively say, okay, if you want, here are the 3 or 4 things that you guys are trying to get done collectively. This is the parts that you agree on, this parts you don't agree on. Here are the best practices for a tariff that will accomplish that, balancing all the other issues. And will address very directly a number of the key issues, and I really just try to point out 4 or 5 of the key issues that are very technical, like 3-phase, 1-phase, interconnection rules, where you plug in, how you calculate your credits. Some of that stuff gets technical, and we as a board need an outsider to say, this is fair, this is how it's done, this is the best practice that we've seen elsewhere, because if I say it, my voice counts for some here, but having a neutral outsider that removes bias from the discussion, and I think this board needs that neutral voice. Because I am biased.
Kirsten, so I agree that we need somebody to help us with our strategic path. I don't think we should narrow it down to just our strategic stuff about net metering. It needs to be, what do we mean? What are we about? When we set our rates, what are our priorities? When we set our tariffs in net metering, are we after, as cost equalization as much as possible, or are we after more towards it? I think, I like the idea, is not as narrow as just net metering, and I think that needs to happen. And I don't think it has to be a net metering expert, I don't think. When you started talking about it gets into the details and all of that, I'm thinking, well, they need to talk to staff, because staff needs to help us do that, because aren't we then getting into the, okay, this is kind of an operational thing. I get yes, we need help determining our path and then communicating our path to staff. I don't know that I want to go on with and this is, if you want to do this, then you do it this way, because that's not, I don't see that as.
I hear what you're saying, and I agree that there is a fine line there, where we do need to be more functional on this side of the line, right? On the strategy and the alignment from a board perspective. And we don't want to bleed over. And so if we go through this process, we'll have to be careful of that. And then we'll have to make sure that we, that we go as far as we're supposed to go, but not beyond that. And I think, again, to your point there, this particular concept has come up twice today. And once with net metering and once with rates or some other issue. And to me that now we're not going to go find two different experts for this, right? We're going to find one consultant who can help us coalesce our ideas, re-update all the ideas that we formulated in the past about strategy. Look at those again, see where we land today. One of the individual points I wanted to make on the net metering discussion is that we often use this cost shifting term as an end goal or a motivator. And I think that needs more visibility. I think we need to understand what it does, what it means, who it affects, who it doesn't affect.
Is it an investment or?
Don't just say it and say, let's avoid that, say it and understand it. So that's kind of the detail that I feel like has been, run around in the net metering discussion that I see it as a bad thing, but I just don't understand it well enough to say I'm against it. Tim.
So consultants, and we can talk about that later if we get there. Help me understand the consequence of voting no on this or yes, and the ability to change that later. What we say yes, for example, and then a year later, for all the consultants, then we say we're going to do something different. Right? Is that a difficult thing to understand? Simple?
No, it's simple. We can do it. I mean, we just have to notice it for 30 days.
This just after the
I mean, mechanically, I understand that. What I'm talking about is, you set a policy, you put it out there, people are operating it. Now we're giving them whiplash or investment speed. Do we rescind what we had done, give them a different deal based on that? That kind of thing, right? I mean, is there 100 of these in the queue that we have to worry about unwinding? So I'm just trying to understand the consequence of a action one or another.
Yeah. And so we're starting to maintain a queue because there's a variety of reasons why things are waiting for more capacity or something to come on as well. And so that would be no different. We could have a queue. If somebody came in and said, I wanted to put in a 100 kilowatt system, and we said, that's right, you just put in 50. And let me know if if I never put in 100, another 50, do that. The,
We grandfather people in too.
yeah,
That's the other main point.
and the other thing is, there's,
Yeah.
well, there's
So I don't know
no,
if we track back on somebody who already.
So whereas somebody could say, I'm gonna wait to see if you make a change, or they could say, yes, I'm gonna go ahead. If they go ahead, they're in under that thing. I guess we wouldn't give them a better deal if we came up with one later, maybe we
Right.
would, I don't know. But I'm just trying to understand, you know, how a decision here, especially a yes decision, ends up with putting us in a place which we can't come back from, right? If we decide to do something else.
all of these changes we're discussing are only about approval of the initial sites. It has nothing to do with the compensation once it's installed. And so it's not like if the rules change, they'll be compensated any differently. They would just have the option. Let's say you approved it today, and then later up the limit from 50 to 100. And it's like, okay, great, I can put in the extra 50 if I want to. Conversely, you can't reel it back. Once you put the 100 in, it's in.
So, all right, so. Just want to finish up.
Keep going.
So as the FEC chair, right? I have a bit of a dilemma. One is that, you know, we spent a lot of time in the process to get the staff performed admirably, in my opinion. Went out and talked to people who would be affected in this, stakeholders in this, some with key stakeholders, and a lot of information with a background that lends itself to building solar and so forth. And we came back with what was perceived to be a compromise to address a looming issue that we see. And that looming issue had plenty of opportunity for the stakeholders to keep coming back with additional feedback and so forth. And notwithstanding the last, you know, sort of Hail Mary, and I appreciate John true to us, but I'm kind of saying, it sounds like a yes vote, keeps us going, doesn't foreclose us being able to change something or do something different. So from my perspective as the chair of the FEC, having been through this whole process, my view is this is a path that we should probably continue down until we have defined what those alternatives should be and how those alternatives fit into a strategic plan and then move forward. So I'm going to leave it.
If I could just clarify, sorry, but just like follow facts rather than advocate for it. So what do you lose? Everything you guys said is correct. But there is a loss, and the loss is substantial. First off, you don't qualify for ITC for upgrades. They only apply to new systems. So if you say I want to do 50 kilowatts now and 50 kilowatts later, 7 kilowatts are ineligible for ITC for federal subsidies. Okay. So you lose that. So it becomes significantly more expensive. Not just you have to bring crews back, you have to roll trucks, put crews back on the roof for a second time. You also lose the eligibility. So that is in practice, and in practice, it rarely happens. Upgrades almost never happen that way because of this problem with how the federal government pays for it. That's number one. Number two, the candy store is open right now in the federal government. Right. And so if you close that door to 50K and below, and that candy store closes and all that USDA money goes away, and that federal ITC money goes away, it's gone forever. It's gone forever, which means that all those homes that need the nurses and the doctors and the teachers who live in this community and the working people who want to put solar on the roof, but need it to pencil economically, may be permanently excluded from the ability to do that if the ITC goes away in a year. Because they can't build it without the ITC, without the federal subsidies. And that's what we lose. Right? And it's in the form, of millions of dollars of subsidies. We're not talking about small dollars here. Right. And I believe that it is it is unfair and unreasonable to to limit our membership from access to that kind of opportunity that rarely comes along while we think about it. Where if we choose no action right now, they can continue to capture that value. But I guess I did advocate a little bit. That'd be cool.
One question, well, thank you for sending that email, and I hope that being worried about doing things at the last minute doesn't keep people from participating in meaningful ways. And I do apologize for staff because they have been, like you said, we've sent them on so many. Can you look this up? Can you change this? Can you talk to this person? It has been months of that, and I feel terrible as a board when we give direction that you're just like, okay, hey, thanks for doing that. Could have just not, or something. But this is important. So, I guess a couple things. One, in that email, I never understood where you're like the teachers and the nurses. I mean, what person has a house over a 50 kilowatt system? Like, we're not changing subsidies for the normal person.
So I try to articulate like that. In practice, I'm not sure there's anybody who has a 50K
Yeah.
system on their home.
Only one that I know of.
Only one.
Oh my gosh.
I think it might be me. It is effectively zero.
Yeah.
You don't have to think about that. One of the weaknesses of the proposed tariff is that in many other parts of the country, we split a commercial tariff from a residential tariff, and you have two. One of them, because of this, above 50K, there are hundreds of buildings in our territory, in your neighborhood, and here, right down the street and right across the street, people all could benefit from much larger systems than 50K.
Which I totally understand that. I just didn't understand this argument of like,
The firefighters.
yeah, the firefighters, like they can do it. Let me finish, because I have a bunch of stuff I wanted to say. I feel like the whole strategic direction is huge, because I felt like this whole time since August, since I've been on the staff working on this, the direction has been, how do we maximize as much solar as possible within our current within our current business model? And that's where the tug and the push and pull have always been. So I think that's a huge thing. It's like, I'm not tied to the current business model. If we can do it better and differently, let's do that. So do we need to take a step back and be like, that was never what you should have been doing, is what I thought fundamentally was the mission of the whole thing. So I kind of lost my train of thought there, but I was kind of thinking, the other thing is with qualifying facilities, when you were like, oh yeah, this is what we would pay for a small solar production, like, to me, I'm like, okay, well, that must pencil then. Like 5 cents kilowatt hour is what people would pay for a small community garden or whatever. So I did a lot of diligence on this, but I didn't know, like, I don't have the industry knowledge that you guys are like, when you're throwing all this stuff out there. I felt like I was passing, I was voting for this tariff that was not a moot point from 50 to 150. I thought this was still relevant. So this is kind of brand new information. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why, since you're asked, that's why throughout this whole FEC process, we kept asking staff, and Jessica herself, to talk to the people who are affected, who are in this industry, to get their feedback.
Right.
And at this point, they're not giving any more feedback. They've stopped. I've verified that more than once, right? So, I'm kind of torn, just like you are. So like, okay, yeah, it's a good idea to look at this. Maybe we should vote no, because we're having such a difficult time coming to an agreement that probably was the safest bet. On the other hand, there's been a huge amount of work, a lot of effort, and a process that I've never seen done before at this level, whereby staff at LPEA went to talk to the interested stakeholders outside the board and the staff itself to absolutely kind of validate whether this would work or not, negotiate something. So I'm not the expert.
Yeah.
I'm not like you. I'm relying on that discussion. So.
Dan, sorry,
Yeah, I'm just.
I think the small hydro's been left out of this. In a way. Small hydro. Is available at a certain point. You have to probably put in a meter, build some transmission line. And with not getting any excess for aggregated metering, I think aggregate metering on hydro has been in effect for a number of years. I've got 4 meters on mine, but it works. But anyway, I think we can't lump hydro in this solar because of the qualifications for being able to locate the facility and then distribute it. So anyway, I think that needs to be looked at a little bit, maybe.
So I'll put words in your mouth. You're suggesting that maybe we vote no on this because it doesn't clarify the differences that are needed
Right.
based on.
And that says hydro will run 24/7, 3765 a year. So we're actually putting a lot of kilowatts in the system, potentially.
David,
I just have a comment as a third wheel on the FAC. I understand what the FAC did, and it was more than tactical. And talking to the stakeholders and several times going back, I commend staff. That was great. But what Tim had said about whiplash over stakeholders, if we go and say yes, and then go and change it 3 months, 6 months down the road, I'd rather vote no and change it 3 months, 6 months down the road. So we're not giving an inconsistent message and we're doing our due diligence. So this is to me, this is a tactical to a strategic. And do we need to look at strategic at other issues before we send staff looking at that? So I have no problem voting no. I would have a problem voting yes if we want to change down the road. The only way I vote yes is if we don't immediately change down the road, giving everybody the flash, because that's not what we need to do to our members at this point.
so let's coalesce on questions that people need to get to a vote.
Is it, we could table this too, right? If we wanted to kick it down the road. I know that's not ideal, but that's one of the alternatives, right?
I'm not sure that has much impact.
Yeah, I'm not sure it does either.
It's the way an abstention counts as a no vote, right?
Yeah.
You know, in a kind of quorum situation, you're basically, by continuing it, you're continuing it past its effective date and it's basically killing it.
Well, it does.
And we're gonna have to announce to the community that this is not gonna go into effect.
But the only thing it does do is it can be adjusted. I mean, we can make some changes without starting from square one again.
You still have to renotice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, through the notice, but-
I mean, we missed our date. I mean, I think it's sort of a material enough change, right? That we missed the effective date. We would need to renotice all over again, right? We can't sort of say, oh, one of the things we amended was, you know, an effective date that's now retroactive. We can't do that. So we would have to renotice it in a way that would probably make it effective April or something like that.
Good. I did want to comment real quick on Dan's topic on hydro. I mean, there's nothing that prohibits hydro. In fact, 50 kW of hydro is equivalent to Linden Dam. So I don't see another Linden Dam going in anytime soon. So you can do that.
Yeah, but you're not getting compensated for the production you're putting up.
Yeah.
He might be talking about an aggregate problem, right?
Yeah, an aggregate problem.
And you could still aggregate, that's even better now. I mean, so now you can officially do what you're doing. It's full retail. So you get.
No, it says it's excess production will be forfeited.
Only, but if you're aggregating, it's a totally different, that's under the net metering tariff.
Or does it become excess?
Yeah, it's only excess. If you got 4 meters, that means you could do 200 kW. So that's just really fits under the net metering tariff. And it's not for it.
Rachel,
Okay, thank you. This one's sticky. So I appreciate Jessica's email response. Someone presented this earlier. What problem are we trying to fix? Someone said that wasn't clear, and I know that was the feedback I also got from the solar installers I'd originally talked to. And so, right, this model is to mitigate the amount our members pay for grid facilities. So it's really focused on that. That was helpful. The other thing where I am trying to sort through, and there's a question for you, Dan. So of the 1,300 systems installed over the past 5 years, only 10 would have been limited by the size of the policy we're proposing. So that's 10 of 1,300. However, we have dozens that are over 50K in the queue today. That will significantly increase the rate of the cost shift. And again, yes, there's a need to unpack cost shifts, but so I guess my question is, Dan, when we look at the cost shift over the next 10 years, which is projected to be $33.1 million, is that for current state installs, or is that including these projected cost shifts with the dozens of 50 kW plus size systems in the queue?
Inclusive of everything, year over year, adding systems. If you look at the exact number you're looking at to know that that was with looking at the new policy or the existing policy. I think it said the existing policy, and I gave a number in there.
It said, yeah, that's like status quo. If we do nothing, is my understanding is it's 33.1 million is the cost shift. And then it was saying we could reduce it. You know, there's those 3 options in the grids you showed us, the yellow, green, gray grid. But I just want to make sure that 33.1 million, that includes future build or what's in the queue. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. That's the only reason why there's a difference there is that it would trim out. Basically, we're trying to keep on the same trajectory we're on today. You know, today it's growing. That keeps us on that trajectory. But if we're just from what we're seeing, I've got lots of systems, yes, from the school, from the city, from natural gas developers, grocery stores. You know, and so is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's a lot coming in, but it's gonna definitely pitch up the rate at which that cost should occurs. It's gonna pitch up faster than what we've ever seen before.
Okay. And then the second question I had is a clarification question. Again, based on the fact that we have big installs in the queue, how or does this impact the policy 115 limitations, which we are still in? We are still in our wholesale WESC contract or whatever it's called. And so if we take no action today, would all of this new install come in the net metering scheme of things, and we'd be charged above our 5% at that even greater tri-state rate?
And that's only for the excess production. So only when people generate more than what their load is at. And currently it's people are allowed to put up to 150%. The proposed tariff actually bumps it up to 200. So yes, the big systems can contribute to that if they're oversized.
Is that a legitimate concern if we stick with what we've got right now? Because I know we were at, I remember in the 90 percentile saturation or something.
So it impacts a couple of different things. One, it's impacting the amount of the penalty that we have to pay the tri-state true up. And 2, it does, you talked about the saturation there. It does, like just for the school systems, we're now having to say, you know, Riverview was full, Animas was full, because there was more generation than there is load out on the system in total. So it
Measured on the face plate.
No, measured at a substation, I'm receiving backwards power flow, so nothing to do with nameplate capacity, it's physical simultaneous capacity.
Oh, you're
But-
meaning no one else in that, who's on that system, like the houses next door can't put anything on because the big buildings are sucking up all the infrastructure capacity?
It's not that they can't put anything on, it's just it has to be non-exporting. They can't use the grid as the free battery anymore on some of the new circuits. Or on some of the full circuits.
And that is an engineering concern and frankly, no concern for that is squarely in staff's wheelhouse. And I don't think it speaks to policy. You guys need to flip down, no export for engineering restrictions, so be it. But that doesn't speak to the policy matter.
Yeah, it's the only thing that impacts is, yeah, you get there sooner. You know, we drove it up and there it is, now you got to focus a little more on it.
I have one more thought to call a question. And then I'm happy to call a question myself.
After I talk, we'll call a question.
Should we get a beer for that?
The spike that's being caused by the larger systems is directly a function of the USDA money becoming available. The USDA money is not really available to residential homeowners. So a number of people in our area have been marketing the USDA process. And that's why you've seen a large lift in places like Tailwind, the airport, the car dealers, because they're trying to capture the value of that. And this tariff would close that door to them.
Tim,
Yeah, let's call a question.
no, but let's just see, is anybody else, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, once it's been asked. Yeah, we have a second, so there's no debate on call the question, we have to go immediately to the vote.
All in favor of calling the question? Any opposed? Abstentions?
Rachel, I didn't catch.
I'm opposed to calling the question.
Okay, it passes, question's called. Okay, so straight to a vote. So we are, all in favor of passing the current, the current net metering and qualifying facility rate tariffs, say aye. Aye.
To Rachel, are you or against Rachel?
I'm a no. Yes.
You're not voting aye.
So 2 in favor, all opposed?
1, 2, 8.
Any abstentions?
Rachel,
Okay. All right, so motion does not pass. Okay, we need to hustle here. I respect if people need to leave at 4 o'clock. We will try and maintain a quorum to keep this business going because we do have some business to do, but don't feel like you got to stay past 4 if that's a hard stop for you. Okay. Third item on finance and audit, motion to approve the finance and audit committee's recommendation for staff to prioritize evaluating new build construction over remodel construction for the Durango headquarters. I believe there's a memo in the board packet.
The same memo, we didn't write a new memo.
No, it's a FAC recommendation. I think is what it is. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to continue on the FAC.
No, I would love for you to do it. I would love for you to do it.
No, I didn't really agree.
We're on your clock now.
Right, so the FAC, again, after all of us have had discussion, and then we also had discussion on the FAC. recommends that the board simply approves the pursuit of a new building to replace the current administrative office structure and not pursue a remodel. So this is really a question of, do we go new or do we go remodel? Let's answer that question so that the money that we've allocated for this to be planned in the 2024 budget doesn't get split between two scenarios, right? We at the FEC, and looking at this information, along with staff, felt that the overall long-term economic benefit to the members was better with a new building rather than remodel. So that's really all the question is. We're not approving necessarily a new building will be built, but that we're going to investigate and focus on that as the only option. Cool. And we'll make a motion that we do the new build. It's actually a motion that comes out of the, that is, but thank you. And there's no second needed, it's straight to discussion.
Just one question, so we have comments or questions, is this the time to do that, or are you gonna say when would we make comments or ask questions about, the building that's?
Well, I would say that, and I'll leave this to Jessica, because it's, in the end, it'll be a staff that carries us forward, but all questions are good at any time, but don't expect an answer today. Okay. So, and Elizabeth and I thought you had hand up. Yep. Okay.
Hello.
So, all in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? You abstain?
Jones abstaining.
John's.
All right, well done, Tim. So we got one more.
Three more.
Well, one more. We see, which is the rate stabilization.
So. So. Previously. Go back one time, we discussed this before and we, I think, made a recommendation to the board. So around the budget, it's around budget. That, that we would meet any operating margin above what we had set for the 2023 margin goal would be used for, this rate stabilization fund, right? So that was something that was embedded, as I recall, to some degree in the budget recommendation and the approval of the budget, if I recall correctly. And I hope I am. In any event, what's on the board, what's on the table now for the board is that the board approve an increase to the rate stabilization fund balance of $3.094 million, which would also decrease operating margins. It will leave us with our operating strategic goal operating margin of 2% for 2023. So we will meet our strategic goal in that regard. And we will also buttress the rate stabilization fund with the excess above that. Does that make sense to everyone? You want to explain that well? So I'll make that motion accordingly. I don't think that came out of it.
Yeah, I don't know if it was.
I'll just make it,
but yeah, so we'll take that as a board motion. Second.
we have a second. Seconded.
And that's in the budget already.
No, this is 2023. In the sense that we had agreed that anything over that 2%, we would earmark for rate stabilization. It was an agreement. Well, I don't recall exactly if that was part of that budget. In any event, it was not binding. We had to see if we got here, thus the motion. Yeah, this moves forward, what would be the balance then in the rate stabilization? Would be 10, glad you asked that, because they gave that number. 10.9 million. Almost 11 million. And a few years ago, we preferred the idea that we would get this to 10 million. So we're there, and just a little bit of that. We went for 10 million, yes. Okay. Again, exact motion and timer. Rachel, you have a question? Thank you.
I think you might have just said this at the end of your comments to Kohler. I just couldn't quite hear. I seem to recall when we had originally set this up, wasn't it like a ratcheting up mechanism that each year there wasn't? I don't recall ever saying like any excess goes into this. I thought it was 1 year it was 2 million, 1 year it was 3 million. Were we trying to get to a certain amount in rate stabilization?
Well, yes, the board's strategic goal does ratchet up the operating margin over a period of time to 3%. I think it's 2.5% next year, 3% the following year, and then that goal said we would remain at 3%, right? The excess has never been on a long-term basis dedicated to anything other than the normal capital credit allocation, right? When we first set up the rate stabilization fund and subsequent to that, in other discussions, maybe it was just at the FAC that I recall, I thought it was at the board level. We had an agreement in principle that we would get this to a $10 million fund, right? Again, I don't recall, I can't point to a specific motion or a specific. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think I was getting the 2.5 and 3% margin piece conflated.
2.5 is next year. We did pass the budget for next year, which has that target.
So the question mine comes down to, we have excess margin, do we want to use it for capital credit allocation that our members will see in 20 years? Or do we want to put it into a fund that our members are going to see probably in pretty active stuff in the next 5 years? Was that a good way to?
That's certainly a valid way in my mind to think of it, but.
And there's a strategy on either way. That's how I'm weighing it.
My view is in either case, it's going to be a benefit to the members.
Absolutely.
The question really was timing and form.
Okay.
I mean, in the end of the day, if we don't need $10 million rate stabilization fund, we can always remove that and put it back into capital credits and pay it at another time. I think we'll probably need it. All right, so any other discussion?
Just, Tim, I'm just curious, why wasn't it in the packet?
Why wasn't this in the package?
Do you want me to explain?
Would you please?
I would be happy to. We didn't have our financials until this morning.
Oh, that was connected.
Yeah, so we wanted to give you the most accurate number we could.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can't really do this until you know what December is really going to be. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Or abstention? I think that's back to you. Well done. Thank you.
All right. This could be interesting since the chair of the COP departed. We might be able to gloss over this. So I'm actually going to make that proposal that we skip over the board action on committee on policy. There's a relatively simplistic red line on policy 110, but then there's an attached memo that I think deserves review. And
That was sent late last night.
okay, and so then there's a little bit of that too. Yeah. That in and of itself to me justifies pushing this out. There certainly is no urgency on either of those topics. Would you sort of agree with me as a committee member, Joe?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else have objections to moving past committee on policy?
So we would continue that to the January meeting, then.
Continuing it to January.
So we need a motion.
Or we can just go by consent. Is there any objection to continue to January?
Thank you.
On the beer.
Okay, we are on item C, which is Roundup Foundation Director appointments. I guess we have 2 to make. I'm not in a position to lead that discussion.
Wasn't the director for each of those?
Yeah.
Do we have to nominate?
Yes. So why don't you lead it around?
So, yeah, we have, I believe, both, district directors have coalesced around the nominee for their district, District 1.
Sure, yeah, so District 1, we coalesced around Lori Gutierrez. And would like her to nominate her for the position at the foundation, but we also had another great nominee, just had to choose.
Yeah. So we have a nomination, for District 1. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Perfect. It's unanimous. We can move on to District 2. Yeah.
Yes, we got our heads together and reviewed, I think there was 4 or 5
Nice.
candidates for that. And we come up with Jeff Dunn. Not any real specific reasoning, but looked like a good candidate.
We get to have another man on the board.
What?
Any discussion on District 2 nominee? We vote then, all in favor?
Oh, I have a question.
Oh, wait, okay, well, sorry, you raised your hand, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Pre-vote, sorry. So I heard you had a bunch of candidates and then I missed, like, what are the criteria you all use to select between and make this recommendation?
There was, so in District 1, there was a recommendation that had been submitted. There was their CV essentially. Yeah, so we didn't like interview them. We just read through both of the resumes and decided who we thought was a better fit.
Thank you for that. That's good to know your process. And then how about the other district?
So with District 2, we had 4 applicants, and I did call each one of them and interview them. I asked the same questions to all 4 of them. And I really couldn't come out with a winner. I thought they're all about the same order. So then I just talked with Dan and John and came up with Jack. The only real reason why he popped out or someone else did it was nobody knew any of it, so it was just, I kind of let you put it on there in the end.
One thing about Jeff, his spouse has worked in the school district and understands the need for help with some of the nonprofits. Seen the, what I want to say, the low-income students in the school district. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Vote again.
Any further discussion? Let's now officially vote. All in favor of the District 2 nominee, say aye.
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 That's unanimous.
Okay. All right, well, I believe we have one more action item. Delegate and alternative to NRECA annual meeting.
Yeah, this was brought to our attention that the NRECA annual meeting has some early bird discounts available if we choose our delegate now as opposed to when we normally do in January. We might be able to save a little money on registration.
Couple $100 in.
So,
Yeah, so I guess if we have nominees or volunteers.
When's the meeting?
February, we'll start February 29th. I didn't know it was a leap year. That's when the training starts. I think it's mostly Wednesday and Thursday.
Yeah.
Where is it?
It's in Central.
No, I can say it for free.
So I guess, if it's too early to make this decision, it would cost us a little money, but we can postpone the decision. But, if we have interested parties, that are ready to make this decision.
So 2 people go?
We have a delegate and alternate, yeah.
I can go as alternate and stay for free. I'll just need to check my calendar, but I wouldn't mind. I got friends, I still have friends that are even though.
You got friends?
Yeah, I love the places.
We just need someone to be the delegate.
I'm interested in going.
Yeah, and I imagine we could substitute if something happened and probably still maintain our, yeah, be willing to be.
Yeah,
be active.
Yeah, I'm alternate. I'm serious.
Yeah, great. Okay, does anybody else want to be in the running for this?
I'll nominate
Said
Nicole.
February 29th.
February 29th is what Kirsten said.
The 29th is the kind of beginning of, it's a whole week, so
When I-
that's beginning of training.
Yeah, when I looked at it, I thought it would be more of a commitment of just the meeting, which is not the training beforehand, so like the 3rd through the 6th.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause it's really to go to vote.
Yeah.
And that's on one day.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Depends on how many birds you're trying to kill.
Yeah.
Before we get some good training in.
Yeah, Rachel, anything else on that? Were you wanting to consider it?
Hold on, I'm looking at my calendar.
I just can't see.
NRECA. Do you have to be there the morning of the 3rd? Or sorry to be so specific. I'm like flying out of a hut. Flying home, but available the 3rd through the 6th, but I don't. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to find it on their website.
It's linked on the onboard.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I can make the dates, unfortunately. I'd love to put my name in the hat, but can't do it. So nope, I'm done.
So yeah, it looks like we have just one nominee for delegate and for alternate.
So
So
I'll make a motion. Nicole's delegate. David is the second alternate, and hopefully that isn't during the FAC.
We'll phone in and.
Move into audio. Any other discussion on that? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Dan?
We're done voting there, right? We are. What about that special meeting, NRCA, Colorado, CREA, trying to get candidates for the Colorado representative to replace?
Yeah, our board meeting does fall 2 days after that nomination's due. They're doing, my brain is trying to recollect this. It's,
It's an email just got through there.
Thank you, I guess. All right. We have to collectively, among Colorado cooperatives, nominate a person to the NRECA board. So if we, as a board, have anybody, and it could be anybody in our membership too, I don't think it has to be right there on the board. But if we want to nominate somebody for that board, we have to let CREA know by January 15th.
The person's listed as a delegate to put in the vote. On that delegate list.
Oh, because I was the NRECA.
Yeah.
State, though, right? Yeah. Okay. That would be, I assume it's gonna be whatever vote they, I guess I meant. Yeah. I'm trying to be- No. Yeah, I think that's a good question. I have to find out. I will be in country. I'd be happy to do it or not, doesn't matter. Does anybody want to sit on the NRECA board? Oh, no. That's what this is for.
So-
Oh, I know, no, we're talking about who votes to.
Yeah, they're talking about the vote in
We-
January 51st at 3:30 PM at CREA headquarters. Immediately following the CREA board meeting will be.
That would be, yeah, we should make you the.
Yeah.
The primary for that since you'll be there.
So,
Okay. So that would be the only board action I see is making Holly the voting member.
voting delegate to the Colorado NRECA meeting to be held January 31st, 2020.
Oh, no, I'll do it.
So there's two things. One is who we are sending to vote, and the second is if any of us want to be put our name in the hat to run for the NRECA board?
Well, so according to the solicitation email I'm reading, is that you would apply directly. You would contact Julie Baker at CREA and express your interest that way. It doesn't appear that the nominations come out of our board of directors. What we need to do is select our voting delegate to that meeting. And it sounds like Paul is already going to be there as our CREA director, so most efficient for us that she just also serve as our Colorado NRECA delegate for that meeting.
So a motion would be awesome.
I moved to nominate Holly for the voting member on the NRCA selection committee.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on Holly being the voting member? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, unanimous, Holly, you got that.
I got it.
Okay, we have previously discussed, leaving reports off of, the agenda, or cutting them off the agenda. If anybody has questions for the people who put those reports in, I think they'd be happy to answer them via email, so don't be afraid to ask. Seeing no other items, meeting adjourned.
What?